It all began on a very cold night when snow was swirling around. Suddenly, my phone rang. On the other end was my mother-in-law, and she was furious. She shouted at me, blaming me for my sister-in-law's terrible situation. "You need to take responsibility. Why did you leave my daughter?" she yelled, making me feel terrible. "My name is Amy, and I'm 33 years old. I live with my husband, Zach, who has parents and an older sister." That phone call changed my life completely. My mother-in-law cried, "Give me back my lively girl. I swear I'll make you pay for this." I tried to calm her down, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." Even in my confusion, I wanted to understand what was happening, but it was hard to talk to her. She just kept shouting, "Why didn't you help her? Why did you leave her?" My mother-in-law wouldn't listen, even when I asked her to slow down. Then my father-in-law got on the phone. He said, "Amy, you need to understand what you've done. Our daughter has severe injuries, but she's not in danger. Why did you let her suffer?" I was confused and told him, "I'm sorry, but I really don't know what you're talking about. What happened?" He looked surprised that I had no idea, but he finally started to explain. My sister-in-law, a single mom, lived about a 20-minute walk from us. She had a boyfriend who often got angry and hurt her. The night before, he had been especially violent. Fearing for her life, she grabbed her child and ran outside into the snow without a place to go. She thought of her brother, Zach, and rushed to our house for help. When she rang the doorbell, Zach answered. My sister-in-law stood outside, clearly in distress, holding her child. Her face was bruised, and she was struggling to breathe. Anyone could see something was wrong, but Zach didn't seem to care. He looked annoyed and said, "If I let people in without asking Amy, she'll get mad. Sorry, but you need to go home. I don't want to deal with her anger." My sister-in-law was shocked by his response, but she needed to find somewhere safe. In tears, she pleaded for money to stay in a hotel since she had left in a hurry and didn't have her phone or wallet. Zach replied, "I don't have that kind of money. There's cash in the house, but Amy would never let me use it without asking. If I did, she'd divorce me. You need to find another place. It's too cold for me to stay outside, so I'm going back in." And he shut the door, leaving her in despair. Feeling hopeless and scared for their lives, my sister-in-law trudged back through the snow, reluctantly returning home. My sister-in-law suffered even worse violence from her angry boyfriend. He beat her until her face was unrecognizable, and he even kicked her child, causing him to lose consciousness. She tried to hold on to her boyfriend to stop him, but the violence only got worse. Her screams and the sounds of breaking dishes echoed through the neighborhood. A passerby heard the commotion and realized something was wrong, so they called the police. After that, my sister-in-law and her child were found, beaten and collapsed, and were taken to the hospital in an ambulance. While they were conscious, they were seriously injured and hospitalized, with doctors saying it would take a month for them to fully recover. I got home late last night from work, and my sister-in-law didn't show up after I arrived. If I had been there, I would have never turned her away. I believe that if I had seen her in such a state, I would have immediately let her in and called the police for help. I don't understand why my in-laws think I was the one who refused to help her. On top of the shock of what happened to my sister-in-law, it was hard to accept that my in-laws were crying and blaming me for it. I felt very confused. Even with my father-in-law's constant accusations, I knew I had to clear up this misunderstanding. I frantically explained, "I wasn't home when my sister-in-law came by. I worked late at the cafe I run. If I had been home, I would have noticed something was wrong and let her in. I would never turn her away. Please give me time to figure out what happened." Although he didn't fully believe me, he seemed to calm down and hung up the phone. That day, I was busy at my cafe, trying to develop a new menu. I had told Zach when I expected to be home, but I ended up working longer than planned. I missed the last subway and had to take a taxi, arriving home after midnight. When I got home, I saw Zach, but he didn't mention anything about his sister. I was confused about why he acted that way, so I confronted him after he came home from work that night. His response shocked me. I could tell something was wrong when my sister-in-law showed up, but I was about to enjoy my cold beer and wanted to close the door quickly since it was freezing outside. I didn't think there was anything I could do. I felt frustrated by Zach's selfish excuse. "Didn't you feel anything when you saw her like that? Why couldn't you at least let her in? She's been through so much since you turned her away." When I explained his sister's condition, Zach justified his actions by saying, "Remember how you used to complain when my parents came over without notice? I thought I was being considerate by not letting her in, thinking you wouldn't like it. What did I do wrong?" It turned out he thought I would be annoyed if his sister showed up unannounced, so he sent her away. I asked. Why didn't you lend her any money? You could have done that much, right? He replied. I was surprised when she asked for money. I'm short on cash before payday, and I just lost money playing slots. I only had about $10 in my wallet. If I gave her our household money, I knew you would get mad, so I said no. I don't see anything wrong with that. I was shocked. I had always thought Zach was a bit self-centered but had good qualities too. I had been trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, but now I realized that was a mistake. He couldn't make good decisions because he always thought of himself first. He had no compassion for others, not even for his sister. He cared more about his drinking than her distress. It was too late for me to realize this now. He didn't seem to feel guilty or responsible for his sister being rushed to the hospital. From his perspective, she would have ended up hurt no matter where she ran. At least she's safe in the hospital now. We're both safe. Thanks to me, right? He talked as if it wasn't a big deal. His heartless comments made me feel like I was losing my mind, so I decided to stop talking to him. Holding back my anger, I told my father-in-law about Zach's irresponsible behavior towards his sister the night before. When he heard what I said, Zach's father lost control and shouted, "There's no way my Zach would do that to his own sister. You're lying. Stop making up stories. Amy, are you trying to make Zach look bad to escape your guilt? If you're going to say such things, show me proof." He refused to listen to me and blamed me for everything. I endured his accusations while desperately trying to figure out how to prove my innocence. If things stayed this way, I would be seen as a monster, while Zach, the real culprit who turned his sister away, would feel no guilt. I couldn't tolerate that. I remembered that my sister-in-law had arrived at our home around 9 p.m. that night. After thinking it over, I found something that could prove I wasn't at home. My cafe had a security camera, and the footage clearly showed me working alone until around 11 p.m. that night. Armed with this footage and a taxi receipt showing the time I got home, I went to my in-laws to prove my innocence. "I was at my shop when your daughter came home. Do you believe me now?" I asked, hoping they would finally understand. They probably didn't want to believe it, but with clear evidence, they had no choice. Zach's father trembled and muttered, "So Amy wasn't home then?" Despite their shock, Zach's parents quickly called him in to find out the truth about that night. As soon as he arrived, they demanded, "Why did you drive your sister away?" Just like before, Zach tried to shift all the blame onto me, claiming he thought I wouldn't want his sister in our home. Hearing this, his father said, "We already know Amy wasn't home after that time, but your sister says she saw a woman in the house. How do you explain that?" I was speechless. If there was another woman in our home at 9 p.m., there was only one possible explanation. "Wait, Zach, what's going on? Who is this woman?" I asked, my voice shaking. Zach's face turned pale as he squirmed under the questioning from both his parents and me until he finally confessed everything. When I told him I would be late because I was working on a new menu, he saw it as an opportunity to bring his mistress home. He knew I often came home after midnight when I was focused on work, so he felt safe inviting her over. But when his sister suddenly showed up asking to be let in, he panicked and drove her away to keep his affair a secret. "What were you thinking? You betrayed Amy and left your sister out in the snow. Why didn't you lend her any money? Explain yourself." His father's anger was intense. Zach admitted the real reason he hadn't given her any money. He actually had plenty of cash left but didn't want to lend it to her because he wanted to buy a bag and shoes for his mistress. He didn't want to upset her for the sake of his sister, so he quickly got rid of her by shutting the door. I was furious, but Zach's parents were even angrier. "Before being a brother or a husband, you lack basic human decency. As parents, it's our responsibility that you grew up to be this way, but we cannot tolerate this. From today on, we are cutting ties with you. Don't ever show your face to us again." Zach's father disowned him. In the same vein, I said, "I'm divorcing you. You cheated on me and put your sister's life at risk by leaving her out in the snow. I can't live with someone like you anymore," I said. Zach was shocked to be disowned and confronted with a divorce all at once. He started begging for forgiveness, crying, "I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Please forgive me." He clung to his father's leg, but his father shook him off, saying, "What you did is the absolute worst thing in our eyes." None of us, his parents or I, could ever forgive Zach. It turned out he had been having an affair with the other woman for a year. The mistress was a coworker whom he had secretly brought to our house when I wasn't around. It was infuriating to learn that I had been betrayed behind my back for so long. Zach even tried to blame his treatment of my sister-in-law on me, which only fueled my anger. I had no second thoughts about divorcing him. I made Zach sign the divorce papers and submitted them right away. After that, I went to a law firm, hired a lawyer, and filed for damages against both Zach and his mistress. I also called Zach's boss, who had been our matchmaker at our wedding, and through my tears, I told him we were getting a divorce. I explained everything about Zach's affair. His boss, a man who valued human decency, had repeatedly warned Zach at our wedding to never betray his wife. So, when he learned about the infidelity, he was furious. Word reached upper management, and on his boss's advice, Zach was transferred to a branch office in the countryside. His mistress was moved to a different department, where she had to sort documents all day. However, my sister-in-law's revenge was even more ruthless. Still recovering from her injuries, she deeply resented Zach for what he had done that day. To vent her anger, she took extreme measures. By coincidence, she worked for one of Zach's company's clients and knew some of his colleagues. Using her connections, she revealed the cruelty she and her child had suffered that day. The employees who thought the divorce was just about the affair were shocked to learn the truth. Zach's abandonment of his own sister to cover up his affair stunned everyone in the company. The rumor spread quickly, and soon, Zach was seen as a terrible human being by everyone at work. Once Zach was ostracized by everyone, his work suffered, and he was eventually demoted. He couldn't handle the cold treatment from his colleagues and found it hard to keep working in his new position, so he ended up quitting. To pay me the high alimony, he drained his savings and now works part-time jobs. Almost all his salary goes toward these payments, and I've heard he can't even afford a coat for winter, so he shivers in thin t-shirts. I no longer have to worry about missing the last train, and I can focus on coming up with new menu ideas. Though I went through unexpected events, I realize now that I probably wouldn't have been happy if I had stayed married. There are things one must never do as a human being, and I intend to always remember that and live a life I can be proud of. That's what I truly believe. As for the mistress, she stubbornly held on to her job despite the judgmental glances from her coworkers. After consulting my lawyer, I decided to ask her parents to pay the damages. When her parents found out, they were shocked and quickly made her pay the full amount after confirming the facts. I kept receiving calls from her, which I never answered, but she left numerous abusive messages in my voicemail, saying, "Why did you tell my parents? I'm in debt now. My life is ruined because of you." I found it unbearable, so I sent her messages to her parents. Later, I received an apology letter from them, promising they would never let their daughter bother me again, and the harassing phone calls stopped. As for my sister-in-law, the actions of her abusive boyfriend became a police matter, allowing her to file for damages due to her injuries. It was tough, but she finally managed to break up with him. My in-laws and sister-in-law apologized to me for initially suspecting me and for Zach's infidelity. Although both experiences were painful for me, I understood their outrage and loss of control when they saw their daughter taken away in an ambulance after such severe abuse. After all, Zach's affair wasn't their fault, and I didn't hold a grudge against them. On the contrary, I wanted them to help my sister-in-law and her child heal from their terrible experience. If I were in their shoes, I'm sure my parents would have reacted the same way. Moreover, my in-laws and sister-in-law are fundamentally decent people. Now that I've divorced Zach, I'll probably never see them again, as they are now strangers to me, but I sincerely wish them well and hope they take care of themselves. I moved closer to the cafe I run since it's within walking distance. I no longer have to worry about missing the last train, and I can focus on coming up with new menu ideas. Though I went through unexpected events, I realize now that I probably wouldn't have been happy if I had stayed married. There are things one must never do as a human being, and I intend to always remember that and live a life I can be proud of. That's what I truly believe.
I don't have any money to give you, I said firmly, looking at my husband Kevin. He barely acknowledged my words, his eyes gleaming with a self-centered excitement. I'm going to stay with her when she turns 20, he declared, referring to his mistress. My heart ached as I looked at him. Kevin, who had been diagnosed with germinal cancer, was in need of treatment, but all he could think about was leaving me for someone else. I had forgiven him so many times for his habitual infidelity, always for the sake of our daughter Amy. It felt cruel to rip her away from her father when she was so attached to him. After you and your parents die, all the property will be mine, he said bluntly, almost giddy at the thought of inheriting the insurance money and the real estate my family owned. He had no shame, no empathy for my suffering, but he didn't realize he would be the one to lose everything in the end. I'm 37 now, living with Kevin and our daughter Amy. We met through work, and I was charmed by his smooth talk and easy manner. Without realizing it, I fell for him, and after dating for a while, we got married. My family was wealthy, owning multiple properties, but I had kept that a secret from Kevin to protect myself from opportunists. When he finally saw my family home for the marriage introduction, he was shocked. Kevin had seemed different from the others. He was genuinely pleased upon discovering the truth, and my parents, happy with him, even promised us a house as a gift when he became their son-in-law. It felt like the perfect beginning. Kevin was sweet, and every day after our wedding was filled with happiness. But it didn't last. "Kevin, I'm pregnant," I announced 6 months into our marriage, beaming with joy. "Oh, is that so?" he replied with barely a flicker of excitement. His reaction confused me, but I dismissed it. Soon, he began coming home late more and more often. I was suffering from morning sickness and eventually had to stop working, so I questioned his late returns. "I'm just busy with work," he would say curtly. I believed him, trying to cope with household duties and preparing for our baby's arrival. Even after Amy was born, nothing changed. Kevin continued to come home late, never helping with chores or caring for our daughter. I convinced myself he was just overwhelmed with work, but I was drowning in the responsibilities of motherhood. By the time Amy started elementary school, I was accustomed to doing everything on my own. Then one night, while Kevin was in the bath, I saw a notification flash on his phone. A message from a woman, filled with heart emojis. My heart sank. When I confronted him, he sneered. "How dare you, Snoop?" "That's low," he shot back. "So, you've been cheating," I said, my voice trembling. "I wondered why you always came home late." "So what?" Kevin shrugged, his tone indifferent. "Are you planning to divorce me?" I couldn't believe his casual response. He didn't care at all about what he had done to our family. Before I could say more, Amy walked into the room, her face worried. "Mommy, what's going on?" she asked, clearly having heard the argument. "Did I wake you?" "I'm sorry, sweetie," I said, forcing a smile. "Do you love Daddy?" I asked her. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Would you be sad if Daddy wasn't here?" "Yeah, I'd be really sad," she said softly. I felt tears stain my eyes. Kevin's betrayal hurt, but Amy's love for her father was pure. How could I tear her world apart by divorcing him? Faced with Kevin's callousness and Amy's innocent attachment to him, I found myself unable to leave. I bit my lip, knowing I would have to endure. Kevin's behavior didn't change. He continued staying out late, clearly spending time with his mistress. But on his days off, he was the perfect father, playing with Amy and showering her with affection. I lacked the strength to initiate a divorce, and as Amy grew older and busier with school and extracurriculars, life continued in a monotonous routine. Now, Amy is in middle school, and our lives are even more hectic. My mornings are filled with packing lunches, ironing her martial arts uniform, and handling an endless list of daily chores. I throw myself into taking care of Amy, keeping my mind occupied so I can avoid thinking about the man who shattered our marriage. I suddenly felt nauseous and rushed to the bathroom, vomiting up my meal. "Are you okay, Mom?" Amy asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'm just feeling a bit under the weather," I reassured her, trying to smile. "I'll be fine after some rest. You go ahead and get to school." After she left, I lay down for a bit, hoping the rest would help. I assumed it was just a minor stomach issue, but as the days passed, the pain grew worse. My husband didn't come home again last night, as usual. For Amy's sake, I pushed through, trying to keep up with the household chores despite the growing pain, but eventually, I hit my limit. I went to see a doctor who told me they'd contact me with the results later. The pain became unbearable. I couldn't do any chores. All I could manage was to lie in bed. That's when Kevin finally came home. "Must be nice, lying around all day and skipping the chores," he said coldly, oblivious to my suffering. The scent of another woman's perfume lingered on him. Anger and sadness washed over me, but I had no energy to confront him. A few days later, the hospital called. "Please come in with a family member for the results," they said. "Can't I come alone?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We prefer you bring someone with you," was their gentle reply. When I asked Kevin to come with me, he scoffed. "Impossible," he said, brushing me off without a second thought. He didn't come home that night either, leaving me to face this alone. Reluctantly, I asked my parents to accompany me to the hospital. The doctor greeted us with a grave expression. "You have stomach cancer," he said, his voice steady but serious. It has spread to other organs. It's stage 4. We need to begin treatment immediately. Stage 4. That means it's terminal, right? I asked, barely able to get the words out. The doctor nodded solemnly. Yes, but we need to act quickly to extend your life. Everything around me went still. My thoughts froze. Amy had just started middle school this spring. I was supposed to watch her grow, be there for her milestones, her firsts. But now, would I even get to see those moments? Overwhelmed by shock, I couldn't hold back my tears. When I got home, Amy returned from school and saw me crying. She ran over immediately. "Mom, why are you crying?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, sweetie," I said, trying to compose myself. "I have to go to the hospital. I'll need to stay there for a while." "What?" she said, her eyes welling up. I gently explained my illness, and soon Amy was crying too. The pain of seeing her like that was almost worse than the cancer itself. When Kevin finally came home and I told him about the diagnosis, his only reaction was mild surprise. No concern, no comfort. "How bad is it?" he asked flatly. "In the worst case, 6 months. But treatment could extend that," I said, exhausted from both the conversation and the situation. I didn't even have the energy to be angry at his detached response. All I could think about was preparing for the hospital stay and how I'd fight to hold on for Amy's sake. I took care of signing all the documents, arranged the housework, and handled the insurance procedures before being admitted to the hospital. I entrusted Kevin with taking care of our home and Amy. "Please look after the house and Amy," I asked, hoping for a sincere response. Yeah, he muttered, not even making eye contact with me. Days passed without a single visit from him. I quietly spent my time in the hospital, trying to keep my mind off the pain. One afternoon, just as I was about to lie down after lunch, Kevin suddenly appeared in my hospital room, looking hurried. "What's going on?" I asked, surprised by his sudden appearance. "I finished dealing with the insurance," he said, a smug look on his face. "I didn't realize cancer insurance paid out so much just for being hospitalized." I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Kevin smirked. "I'm going to take paid leave starting tomorrow and go on a trip." "What?" My voice shook with disbelief. "You won't be around much longer anyway," he said coldly. "You won't need all this insurance money. I'm going to use it to travel with my girlfriend. She's 20 and she's been wanting to go to Cancun." I stared at him in shock. "Wait a minute, that money is for my treatment costs. What about Amy?" "I'm not wasting money on someone with no future," he said, his tone heartless. "As for Amy, why don't you ask your parents to take care of her? Thanks for the money, though." I was speechless. Kevin had checked the insurance payout and taken it for himself, planning to use it for a trip with the woman he was having an affair with. My stomach ached, but it wasn't just from the cancer. It was from the utter betrayal. True to his word, Kevin left for his trip with his mistress, leaving me behind in the hospital. My parents and Amy came to visit, furious at what he had done. I felt indescribable frustration. Not only had he abandoned me, but he also stole the money meant for my treatment to enjoy an overseas trip with his lover. It was unforgivable. When I was first told my cancer was at stage 4, all I felt was despair. But now, a new resolve burned within me. I couldn't give up. My anger toward Kevin turned into a vow of revenge. He never visited, and I had no idea where he was or what he was doing. Meanwhile, Amy never went back to live with him, and it seemed he didn't care about losing contact with her either. But every day, Amy visited me after school, and my parents stood by me, offering support. It was their warmth and strength that helped me endure the grueling treatments. Their love was the only thing that kept me going. Finally, the day came when I was discharged from the hospital. I expressed my heartfelt thanks to the nurses and doctors who had cared for me, and with Amy by my side, I headed home. After being hospitalized for a month and a half, I missed my home dearly. Walking through the door with Amy's support, I felt both relief and determination. I was home, and I was ready to reclaim my life. When I arrived home and opened the front door, I was greeted by the sight of shoes, Kevin's, and a pair that clearly belonged to a woman I didn't recognize. "What's this?" Amy muttered under her breath, her tone filled with discontent. Even though she was just in middle school, she was old enough to understand that Kevin was cheating. She also knew just how wrong it was. "Wait here for me, okay?" I said softly. I didn't want to expose her to any more pain than she had already been through. Confronting Kevin and the woman he was with was something I could handle on my own. Leaving Amy at the entrance, I stepped into the house alone and raised my voice deliberately. I'm home. I've returned. Kevin appeared from the bedroom, hurriedly adjusting his clothes, his expression a mix of shock and annoyance. The kitchen was a mess, empty noodle cups, ready meal boxes, and alcohol cans scattered everywhere, far more than one person could consume. What are you doing here? Kevin stammered, clearly caught off guard. After sending Amy to stay with her grandparents, he must have thought he had free rein to bring his mistress home. I came back because I was discharged from the hospital. But what is this? What's going on here? And who is she? A young woman emerged slowly from the bedroom, her outfit barely more than lingering, her makeup smudged and messy. You told me your wife wouldn't be coming back, she said, looking at Kevin with confusion. You said this was your house, didn't you? I stared at them both, trying to contain my rising anger. This house was handed down to me by my parents, I said firmly. It's my house. It's not strange for me to come back to my own home. The woman shot Kevin a puzzled look. But you told me this was your house. Kevin, ever the show-off, scoffed and waved his hand dismissively. Ah, but it's practically my house now, he said, clearly trying to maintain his charade in front of her. Why would this house be yours? I asked, narrowing my eyes at him. Kevin smirked, the arrogance in his voice palpable. Because you won't be around much longer. Once you're gone, as your husband, everything becomes mine, your inheritance, all of it. I'll get the insurance payout too. With that money, I'll travel wherever I want, buy whatever I want. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. He had already written me off, assuming that once I was gone, he'd live a carefree life with my inheritance and insurance money. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. But I wasn't done yet. I like that. Sounds great. I want an Hermes bag, the young woman exclaimed, her voice giddy with excitement. Don't worry, I'll buy you anything, Kevin responded, clearly pleased by her enthusiasm. The sight of a man in his 40s fawning over a 20-year-old was beyond ridiculous, but I had reached my limit. You won't be getting a single penny, I said, my voice cutting through their conversation. Kevin turned to me, confused. What are you talking about? I've changed the beneficiary of my insurance from you to Amy. So no, you won't be cashing in on anything. His smug expression faltered for a moment before he laughed mockingly. Are you serious? Amy's a minor. As her legal guardian, I'll get the money. Everything will still be mine in the end. Besides, your parents are loaded. Once they're gone, their inheritance will come to me too. That'd be amazing. We could live it up, right? His arrogance was staggering. He actually believed that he could inherit my family's wealth after my death and my parents'. But I had no intention of continuing this marriage any longer. Without hesitation, I pulled out a stack of documents from my bag. Take a look at these, I said, handing them over. They're from the court. Could you sign and return them as soon as possible? I want this divorce finalized quickly. Kevin's face twisted in shock. Wait, what? I didn't hear anything about a divorce. That's why I'm telling you now, I replied, calm but firm. If you prefer that woman, then both of you should leave. I have no reason to stay in this marriage anymore. His expression darkened. So, you're just throwing me out now. What about this house? I'm your husband, your son-in-law. I have a right to it. And what happens to Amy if we get divorced? Without me, and eventually without you, she'll be all alone. I've already arranged for my parents to take care of Amy if anything happens to me. I said coolly. You've neglected both of us long enough. And as for my parents, they won't be around forever. But Amy will have their support. She doesn't need someone like you dragging her down. Kevin's face turned red, his hands shaking with frustration. Don't act all high and mighty with me. You really think you're just going to cut me out? After everything? Yes, I said, unwavering. Being with someone as unfaithful and selfish as you would be the real pity. Amy deserves better than to grow up in a house full of lies and neglect. Kevin sputtered, trying to come up with a retort. That's not true. Amy's still in middle school. She needs me. She doesn't need you, I said, my voice firm. She needs stability, love, and a future without deception. And that's what I'm going to give her. She likes me and would be devastated if we divorced. You're her mother. If you really care about Amy, you shouldn't go through with this, Kevin said with a smug expression, as if he had me cornered. It was the same tactic he'd used before, manipulating my love for Amy to make me hesitate about divorce. For years, I had clung to the belief that staying together was better for her. assuming she admired Kevin as a father. But who was the one that abandoned his middle school daughter to go on a trip with another woman? "Hey," Kevin suddenly yelled, his voice so loud that Amy, still waiting at the entrance, must have heard everything. The realization that she was within earshot took him by surprise. He didn't expect to be caught. "I don't want a dad who flirts with younger women and ignores his wife," Amy said, stepping forward, her voice filled with disgust. "Hey, Amy, it's not what it looks like," Kevin stammered, desperately trying to save face. "Please leave. This is my and Mom's house," Amy said firmly. Kevin's face fell. "Wait, think about it. Your mom's not going to be around much longer. This house is too big for just you two. We can live together, and a young mom would be nice, right?" The woman standing beside him looked awkward, realizing the conversation had taken a serious turn. "Ha! I'm not interested in being anyone's mother," the woman interjected. "Didn't you say you'd send your daughter away?" "Stop it," I snapped. "Now you're lying in front of her." Kevin's voice faltered. "Amy, you still like me, don't you?" "No way, that's disgusting," Amy said coldly. Her words struck him silent. It was disgusting, bringing in a mistress and talking about a new mom while I was still battling an illness. "Kevin," I began, my voice steady but resolute, "you're making a huge mistake. And just so you know, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon." He blinked, clearly taken aback. "What? But you said it was terminal cancer." "It was terminal. But surgery removed most of the cancer, and chemotherapy and radiation have worked better than expected. I'm still being monitored, but for now, the cancer is in remission. I'm not going anywhere for a long time." I hadn't heard that. "You didn't bother asking," I said sharply. "I told you there was hope. You just never listened. I could get better, but you weren't listening, were you? Why do you think I was discharged if things were so hopeless?" I said, glaring at him. "I thought you wanted to spend your last moments at home," Kevin muttered weakly. I scoffed. "What a conveniently selective memory you have. Unfortunately for you, this house belongs to me and I'll be living here from today. So, could you leave right now?" "Wait, just hold on a minute," Kevin said, his voice rising in desperation. "There's no need to rush into this. We should reconsider the divorce. What happened with her was just a fling, and I'll cut ties with her. Let's start over. It's not too late." I glanced at Amy. Her face showed a mix of shock and disbelief. "You really think we can just start over?" I asked, unable to believe his audacity. "I have no intention of going back to how things were." "Don't say that." Kevin dropped to his knees, grabbing my feet as if begging for mercy. "I'll never have an affair again. I'll stop seeing other women. Please, let's give it another chance." The woman standing nearby looked disgusted by his sudden plea, her interest clearly fading as his desperation became obvious. I shook my head. "Do you really think I want a divorce just because of the affair?" "Then what else could it be?" he asked, genuinely confused. I sighed, the weight of everything pressing on me. "I've reached a point where I don't care if you see other women. The real issue is that when your family faced a life-threatening illness, not only did you fail to worry, but you spent the money meant for my treatment on a vacation. You're not just an unfaithful husband, you're a selfish, heartless man who's toxic for Amy's future. So please leave." "But how will you survive if you can't work? You're too sick. How will you make a living?" he stammered, trying to grasp any excuse to hold on. "I have insurance, and the money will be deposited into my account next week. So no, there's nothing for you," I said coldly. His face turned pale. That won't do. I spent everything on the trip. I was counting on your hospital fees for the next payout. I don't have the $155,000 I used, and if I lose the house, I'll have nowhere to live. My life will be ruined." "That's not my problem anymore," I replied, unmoved. "You ruined it yourself." I hoped Kevin might reconsider the divorce, but my decision was firm. "Unfortunately, my mind is made up." "Leave? Amy, can't you ask your mom to think this over?" Kevin pleaded. "No, I don't want to see your face anymore," I said, resolute. With those words, Amy, now stronger and more assertive from her martial arts training, pushed Kevin and the other woman out the front door. Even though he was much older, he was no match for her strength. I watched with a mixture of pride and amusement as Amy, who had grown into a formidable young woman, managed to drag him along. The sight of Kevin's pitiful state made me smile. The commotion attracted the attention of the police, who arrived shortly after a neighbor's report. They quickly escorted Kevin and his companion away. As I watched them leave, I couldn't help but laugh at their absurdity. A year has passed and I've miraculously overcome cancer. My health has fully recovered and there has been no recurrence. I've returned to work in a simple clerical position. Despite my parents insisting that I didn't need to work, I felt uncomfortable sitting idle and wanted to contribute to the household finances, so I've been helping out with chores around the house. Meanwhile, Kevin's life had taken a turn for the worse. Abandoned by his affair partner and burdened with massive debt, he had squandered my treatment funds and inheritance on a lavish lifestyle. Now, he struggled to repay a debt nearing $65,000. I learned this through mutual acquaintances, as Kevin and I used to work at the same place. His financial irresponsibility and poor habits had led to weight gain and loss of interest from women, leaving him leading a lonely life. Given that Amy expressed a strong desire to leave her old home, sickened by memories of Kevin and the other woman, we decided to move back to my parents' house. The property was sold for a good price due to its location, providing us with enough funds to live comfortably without working for a while. I had received numerous requests for financial help from Kevin, but I found them intrusive and blocked his calls. Today, Amy competed in a martial arts tournament, where her skills have continued to impress. "I want to become strong to protect Mom," she said with determination. I cheered her on. "Good luck, Amy." The tension in the venue was palpable as the match began. Amy executed a flawless throw and won the championship. "How should we celebrate?" I asked. "Let's stay up late and watch a movie," Amy suggested. "Sounds good. I'll grab some popcorn," I agreed. I've been wanting to see that movie. As we left the venue, I couldn't help but worry about the challenges of being a single mother, especially during Amy's sensitive middle school years. But despite everything, Amy has grown into a remarkably honest and straightforward person, surpassing my expectations. I have no regrets about divorcing Kevin. In fact, the ordeal has strengthened the bond between Amy and me. Though there is still a risk of recurrence and future challenges, with Amy by my side, I am confident we can face and overcome any obstacle together. It seems my dear husband has changed somehow. He told me, "I'm giving this house to Olivia. If you don't agree, we might need to consider divorce." I was stunned. Why would he give away the house that I bought and lovingly maintained in my name to our eldest son's wife, Olivia? "Maybe you should start looking for a new place soon," he said. It was clear he had a lot of trust in Olivia. With the house in my name and the $1,200 mortgage, I could manage. My eldest son seemed to think the same way. "Honestly, I'm not that attached to this old house." "All right, I'll move out," I said, "but be prepared for the challenges you three might face in the future." I'm Kate, 50 years old, with a solid position at a major company. I live a relaxed life with my husband Paul, who is 2 years younger than me. Last year, we decided to renovate our slightly outdated house, which my father had built. We hoped the renovations would set us up nicely for retirement. The mortgage is $3,000 a month, which I can handle comfortably with my salary. Paul, who manages a small restaurant, earns less, so it seemed practical to put the mortgage in my name. He once mentioned that covering the mortgage payments with just my income might be tough, but we managed. "This house was originally your father's and is now in your name," Paul had said. "Can you handle the full payments? I'll cover our living expenses." After the renovations, the house looked fantastic, and we were thrilled about our refreshed home and the future ahead. But then, things took an unexpected turn. One day, my phone buzzed with a surprising message from our eldest son, David. "I'm thinking of getting married," he said. At 31, David had always been dedicated to his work and had never mentioned a girlfriend before. I wondered about her and what kind of person she might be. If David liked her, she must be wonderful, but I couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and concern. When we finally met Olivia, she had long hair and a lovely personality. She greeted us warmly. "Hello, I'm Olivia," she said, her smile radiating like summer sunshine. I thought to myself, she's too wonderful to be with David. Paul was equally impressed. "She's incredible, really charming," Paul murmured. Olivia, sensing his praise, hugged him and said, "I'm so glad you said that. I hope we can get even closer from now on." Her behavior surprised me, and even David seemed taken aback. Paul looked slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry if I was too forward," Olivia said with a smile, stepping back. "I sometimes get close to people without realizing it." my friends always pointed out, and though I try to be mindful, she laughed apologetically. Her initial behavior was surprising, but seeing the way David's eyes lit up when he spoke of her made it clear how much he loved her. Olivia isn't great with personal space, but that's part of her charm, David explained. She naturally brings people close, making even someone as shy as me enjoy the conversation. Despite the initial shock, I felt she would be a warm and loving daughter-in-law. Time passed, and Olivia and David prepared for marriage, eventually registering their union. It warmed my heart to think about their future together. Then, shortly after their wedding, I came home to find unfamiliar women's shoes at the entrance. Inside, I saw Paul and Olivia together. Olivia greeted me with a smile. "Welcome home, Kate." The living room was cluttered with empty cans and bottles. "What's going on here?" I asked, taken aback. Olivia explained, "We bumped into each other on the way home and decided to have a drink together to strengthen our bond. With the finances tight this month, we thought it would be better to drink here rather than go out." I was surprised to see them drinking alone at home. I didn't want to intrude on their newlywed time, but I wondered why they hadn't just gone to David's place. Olivia, slightly tipsy, mentioned, "Our room's a bit messy, but this place is so clean and comfortable." Where was David? It seemed unusual for a new bride to be drinking alone at our house. I looked around, half expecting David to be hiding somewhere. "Dave's been working late nights and feeling a bit lonely," Olivia explained, sensing my concern. I came downstairs to find Olivia with tears streaming down her face. Paul, his voice gentle, said, "It's okay, Olivia. Talk to me if things get tough," as he patted her head reassuringly. "Thank you, Paul," Olivia responded, her voice trembling. The scene felt surreal, like something out of a movie. I couldn't shake the odd, uncomfortable feeling that seemed to ripple through the room. "Paul, Olivia is important to David. Maybe you should consider keeping a bit more distance," I suggested softly. Olivia, however, defended Paul with a smile. "He's just worried about me," she said. I couldn't help but raise my voice in surprise. This was more than I expected, and I felt a wave of exhaustion from work wash over me. "I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to take a bath." "Please clean up," I said, longing for the solace of a warm bath. After soaking in the tub, surrounded by bubbles and the soothing scent of bath oil, I felt my mind drift far away. Once I emerged and dressed, I was surprised to find David, who was supposed to be driving home, already at the house, looking slightly tipsy. "David, weren't you supposed to drive home?" I asked, bewildered. He grinned, a bit unsteady. "Olivia suggested we have a drink together, and I got pulled in. I've decided to stay here tonight." "Hey, Mom, why not have a drink with your son? It's been a while," he said with enthusiasm. I felt uneasy with an unexpected overnight guest and Olivia's presence. I can drive you both home if you'd like," I offered, but David waved it off. "You must be tired too. It's fine, we'll stay here." Amidst the awkwardness, I heard laughter. Glancing at Olivia, I caught a momentary glimpse of her staring at me intently. Her gaze made me uneasy, leaving me to wonder if I had misunderstood the situation. I tried to reassure myself, but little did I know that Olivia's grand plan was already in motion. The next morning, she arrived at my house first thing, repeatedly apologizing for her behavior. Her reaction seemed a bit excessive, but I understood where she was coming from. When I told her it was all right, she left, looking visibly relieved. However, that night, to my surprise, Olivia was back at my house again. David was nowhere to be seen, and Olivia seemed different from before, which made me worry. "I'm sorry for coming again," she said, handing me a box of sweets. Paul also apologized, albeit sheepishly. "I might have been a bit overexcited yesterday. Sorry about that." I figured if this would help them bond, I should forgive them for now. Both Olivia and Paul thanked me sincerely, but just when I thought I could feel more mentally exhausted, a new twist awaited. One day, Paul approached me with a grim expression. "Can we talk?" he asked. I chose the living room as our spot to chat. While waiting, I was stunned to see David and Olivia walk in. My shock was evident as I greeted them with a confused "long time no see," but they only sat silently. The tense atmosphere hinted at some major news, making me increasingly anxious. Paul finally spoke, dropping a bombshell. "From now on, this house will belong to Olivia. If you can't accept that, we might have to reconsider our relationship." "Why are you saying this?" I asked, my voice a mix of shock and confusion. Before I could process what was happening, Olivia shouted, You need to leave this house." I was utterly dumbfounded. "Hold on, explain yourself. What do you mean giving the house to Olivia?" Paul's cheeks flushed as he replied, "You've always caused trouble for Olivia. You should have thought about this before it got too late." I was at a loss for words, struggling to understand the sudden and harsh turn of events. I felt a deep sense of injustice. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet Paul seemed unconvinced. Olivia, tearfully, told them how much I had hurt her, recounting her pain. She stood next to Paul, visibly trying to hold back her tears. David looked at me with a disapproving gaze, saying, "I never imagined you'd do something like this, Mom. It's heartbreaking." Despite my attempts to explain, my words fell on deaf ears, and Olivia's tears continued to flow. Paul coldly announced, "That's why we decided to go our separate ways. The three of us will live in this house." His words felt remarkably heartless. "Why should I have to give my house to Olivia?" I asked, my confusion evident. Paul replied, "Olivia is deeply hurt. Demanding compensation is one way to address it, but I thought of a different approach. I know how much this house means to you, so by taking it, maybe you'll understand the impact of your behavior." I struggled to believe this was fair or true, as I had never been unkind to Olivia. Moreover, considering Olivia hadn't worked since getting married, a $3,000 monthly mortgage seemed unmanageable for her. When I pointed this out, Paul responded with a smile. "The mortgage will be transferred to David's name. Given his salary and position, the transition should be smooth." I asked, "Is it really that simple to transfer the mortgage?" Paul nodded, explaining, "Usually it's difficult, but David works at a reputable company, and I have connections at the bank where you have the mortgage. I'm confident it can be arranged." His assurances did little to ease my concerns. The atmosphere grew increasingly hostile, as if I was being forced to surrender my home. Despite repeating my stance, I couldn't understand why I was being blamed when I had done nothing to Olivia. I couldn't bear the thought of giving up my house. Paul and Olivia grew increasingly frustrated with my response, and the conversation felt unbearably tense. Olivia, who had been crying the whole time, finally spoke softly. "Kate, please understand. Think of the baby." She gently stroked her belly. David added, "It's true, Mom. Olivia is pregnant, and if she's under too much stress, it could harm the baby. You need to consider that." The revelation that Olivia was pregnant complicated things. No one wants to add stress during pregnancy, but being asked to surrender my home on such short notice was overwhelming. "Give me a moment to think," I said, retreating to my room. Lying on my bed, I was lost in thought when I noticed a long strand of hair on the pillow. No one in my family had hair like this. My heart raced with the unsettling thought of an affair. This realization only added to my confusion and distress. I felt as if I were trapped in a nightmare, hoping to wake up and find everything back to normal. Tears streamed down my face as I drifted off to sleep, wishing this turmoil was just a bad dream. Late that night, I was jolted awake by voices coming from the living room, not David and Olivia, but a cheerful Paul and Olivia. Their conversation, filled with laughter and casual banter, felt completely out of place. I heard Olivia say, "Oh, I really wanted to drink wine." Paul replied, "Remember, you have a baby now." Their carefree chatter weighed heavily on me, and my heart sank further with Olivia's recent behavior. Then an unmistakable sound, a kiss, echoed through the house. Olivia murmured, "Oh, Paul, what if David or Kate sees us? It would be so embarrassing." My mind spun in disbelief. What were they doing? My stomach churned as I realized the depth of their betrayal. They were likely planning to enjoy themselves while I was out of the house. The thought was sickening. The long hair was definitely Olivia's, and without saying a word, I lay there listening to their conversation, feeling a wave of nausea. The idea of staying in a house that now felt tainted by their actions was unbearable. I no longer wanted a home that brought me such feelings. The next morning, I resolved that I needed to move on. I emerged in front of the three of them, rubbing my tired eyes. I hadn't slept well in that bed, but I kept that to myself. "Have you finally made up your mind?" they asked, their faces hopeful. "I've decided to give up the house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Their expressions brightened immediately. "Great, let's move quickly with the ownership transfer. If the house is in my name, the mortgage inspection will be fine," David said excitedly. He seemed oblivious to the full extent of the situation. My heart ached for him, but I chose not to reveal the whole truth. He had always followed Olivia's lead, and I wasn't ready to shatter his trust in her. The next few days were a whirlwind of divorce proceedings and transferring home ownership. Finally, the paperwork was completed, and the house was officially under a new name. "There's no place for you here anymore," Paul said with a touch of sarcasm. "Grandma, it's time to leave." Olivia leaned in and whispered something into my ear. It stung a bit, but even without her comment, I was already resolved to leave. The house held countless memories, but given what had happened, I had no reason to stay. I knew my next actions would stir things up for this peculiar trio. The real drama was just beginning. A month passed, a time for me to gather my thoughts, and I found myself standing in front of that house again. I took a deep breath and hesitantly pressed the doorbell of the house I hadn't visited in so long. My heartbeat seemed to echo in the quiet. "Why are you here?" Paul's slightly annoyed voice reached my ears. It felt strange hearing his tone after so long. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice tight with emotion. "Why should I let you in?" Paul acted as if I were a distant memory. "It involves Olivia," I said, knowing that mentioning her name would soften his stance. I didn't enjoy bringing her up, but I knew it would make an impact. "Oh, look who's here," Paul said sarcastically. His words were legally accurate but still painful. "What do you want?" everyone asked, their eyes filled with suspicion. I took a deep breath and pulled a photo from my pocket. "Can you take a look at this?" I asked, as all eyes turned to the image. The photo showed Paul and Olivia on a date, looking happy and intimate. After the divorce, I had hired a private detective to monitor them discreetly. It wasn't long before I received pictures of their outings. "What's this about?" David's face changed instantly upon seeing the photo. "Where was this taken?" Paul exclaimed, clearly in shock. "What's the big deal?" Olivia interjected defensively. "We're just father-in-law and daughter-in-law. We were just enjoying ourselves." I smirked and pulled out my smartphone. "Listen to this," I said, pressing play on a recording. Paul's voice came through clearly. "Olivia, I really love you," followed by Olivia's voice, hushed and anxious. "If you're too loud, someone will hear in the next room." The recording included sounds that resembled kisses. Paul and Olivia fell silent, their faces registering shock. Seizing the moment, I asked, "Olivia, whose child are you carrying?" David's expression turned to one of confusion and panic. "Could it be my father's?" he murmured. "That's impossible," Olivia began, but her words faltered, catching in her throat. David's anger erupted, leading to a physical altercation with Paul. In the middle of their fight, Olivia cried out in pain, momentarily halting their clash. I seized that opportunity to speak. "Haven't I always said I never bullied Olivia? I feel like she's hiding something from me. Maybe she's lying to David to get me out of the house." David looked utterly shocked by my accusation. "I can't believe it," David said, his voice trembling with regret and disbelief. "I feel so pathetic for doubting Mom. What are you hiding? Tell me everything." His eyes burned with anger. For a moment, Paul and Olivia remained silent, their faces showing shock. David continued, "There's so much evidence. We could even take this to court." The color drained from their faces as the gravity of the situation set in. Olivia began to speak through her tears. "When David and I went on our first date, I really enjoyed it. But the first time I saw this house, I fell in love. My family home is so old, and I dreamed of living in a beautiful house like this. I got close to Paul for that reason. When we were introduced for marriage, I waited for Paul to return, and we had drinks alone. We became close, and it seems we planned to get you out of the house." Olivia's apologies were interspersed with tears. "I'm so sorry. I got too greedy. I should have been honest from the start about wanting to live together." Her voice carried a hint of regret. "In my family, my mom and grandma always argued. I was scared of living with a mother-in-law. This house is so beautiful and comfortable. I was hoping you'd leave." Her admission of the affair with her father-in-law was deeply unsettling. Paul took a deep breath, trying to explain. "Every time I saw her smile, I knew she was using me, but the time we spent together felt so good. Still, it's unforgivable." David's response was brief but carried a heavy weight. His eyes were filled with betrayal, sadness, and anger. Both Paul and Olivia were left speechless, tears streaming down their faces. It was no surprise when David decided to divorce, and a DNA test later confirmed Paul was the father of the baby. "I never thought this day would come," David murmured softly. I gently stroked his head, reflecting on how our family had changed because of Olivia. It seemed she hadn't fully grasped how her choices would impact her future. I had a feeling that with time, my premonitions would come true. 2 years later, on a sunny day, Olivia remarried Paul and started a new life with him under the same roof. Their children went to a nearby daycare, and Olivia tried to make friends with other mothers, though she often felt isolated. Her family's resistance to her divorce from David and her remarriage to Paul have strained their relationship. Their anger towards Paul remained intense, and family gatherings were rare. Meanwhile, the big, beautiful house now quietly stood, occupied only by David. He found solace in the memories of the past and hopes for the future. I've thought about selling this house, but my mother grew up here. I can't easily part with such a cherished home, David said, looking into the distance. He had cleaned and sorted out everything Paul and Olivia had left behind. With a hint of embarrassment, he added, "If I had known you'd go through all this trouble, I wouldn't have said anything. I know it's not right to blame them, but I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you can forgive me, but please feel free to visit the house once in a while. I'd like us to share more together." He handed me a voucher for a resort hotel. I was deeply moved by his warm gesture and nearly brought to tears. Though I couldn't forget everything immediately, I wanted to rebuild our relationship slowly over time. Is this some kind of joke? What do you hope to achieve with this? Why not enjoy sleeping outdoors? From the phone, I could hear my mother-in-law Kathy's mocking voice. How could she drag her grandson into such a mess? I sighed inwardly. Fine, we'd just go home. But Kathy was about to face an ordeal she never expected. My name is Meg. I'm 37 years old and work at a very ordinary company. Tom, my husband, and I have been married for 12 years now. Time flies. I first met Tom in our university club. We used to hang out a lot, but we were just friends and never dated. After graduation, we reunited at a club gathering. From there, we started talking more often and eventually began dating. About a year later, Tom suddenly asked me with a serious face, "Will you marry me?" I'll never forget his expression at that moment. So we got married, and soon after, our lovely son Mike was born. Mike is an active and a bit mischievous boy, but he's genuinely good-hearted. He excels at school and is especially passionate about baseball. He's been playing on a local youth baseball team since he was young, swinging his bat every day, rain or shine. Thanks to Mike's performance, his team often wins, and everyone says he's amazing. Tom and I always cheer for him at his games, clapping and shouting, "Hey, Mom and Dad, did you see today's game? How was it?" Of course, we wouldn't miss it. That home run was incredible. The game shifted the moment you hit it. Thanks. Look forward to even more impressive plays, Mike says with a grin. Then he heads to the yard to practice swings after dinner. His dedication is truly inspiring. He's always been committed, even when he was in the swimming club before baseball, practicing tirelessly despite his struggles. I hold a somewhat senior position at my company and try to embrace the same attitude of perseverance that Mike displays. When times get tough at work, I draw strength from his determination. Despite these daily joys, there's been a lingering concern in our household, Kathy. She seems to have had a grudge against me ever since we got married. Her attitude towards me has been harsh. Meg, why are you resting there? Usually, a daughter-in-law helps her mother-in-law when she's busy, right? Kathy snapped one day. I was caught off guard because my father-in-law Jason had just offered me dessert at the dining table, and I was having a leisurely chat with Tom. Kathy seemed irritated regardless. When I went to the kitchen, she gave me a stern look and muttered complaints. How can you act so thoughtlessly? Was this how you were raised? If your parents were like that, I'd understand. I was taken aback. Kathy knew nothing about my family, and her casual remarks were shocking. I'd never encountered someone who could speak so bluntly before. Since the pre-wedding meeting, Kathy's attitude had been tough, making it difficult to get along with her. As a result, I limited my visits to her house. However, after Mike was born, we began visiting more frequently for the sake of my in-laws, who couldn't wait to see their grandson's adorable smile. Kathy would dote on Mike but consistently direct prickly remarks at me. One day, with a sly smile, she told me if Mike does something wrong, it's all because of your upbringing. She continued to question my parenting, saying things like, "I'm worried with a mother like you," and "Are you disciplining him properly?" The most shocking comment was, "I'd like to raise him myself," as if I was incapable of raising my own child. Her words cut deeply. Strangely, Kathy only made these comments when Tom and Jason weren't around. My silence seemed to irritate her further. Aren't you listening? She'd demand. I'd think, who's the faultless one here? When Tom or Jason returned, Kathy would instantly change her demeanor, praising how cute her grandson was. Visiting my in-laws always meant facing her subtle bullying. But despite everything, after Mike was born, I found a way to cope. I felt stronger as I focused on Mike's milestones, my work, and daily events. These occupied my mind, leaving little room for Kathy's words. Her remarks seemed like fleeting dust, easily blown away. She misinterpreted my silence as agreement, but I simply didn't want to waste energy on her. Occasionally, her comments irritated me, but it was easier to ignore her when she was under a misapprehension. Jason, Tom, and Mike were always on my side. Over time, I'd even thought that these events might eventually become fond memories. 12 years had passed since our marriage, and our visits to the in-laws continued, with Kathy's jabs becoming a part of the routine. I wondered if this was just how in-law relationships typically went. One day, as I was brushing off another of Kathy's remarks, Mike stepped in with serious eyes. He finally voiced what had probably been bothering him for a long time. Grandma, why do you always speak to Mom like that? Kathy was caught off guard. She stammered, Mike, what are you talking about? I haven't. Don't play dumb, Mike interrupted. I've heard you. Stop bullying Mom behind my back. Can't you be kind? I'm starting to dislike that side of you. He looked as if he'd gathered a lot of courage to say this. All he wanted from his grandmother was a bit of kindness. Kathy looked puzzled for a moment, as if she couldn't grasp what had been said. She seemed surprised by her grandson's words, but after a while, a hint of anger appeared on her face. Mike, where did you learn to talk like that? Isn't it rude to interrupt adults when they're talking? This is a conversation between Grandma and Mom. Meg, you need to educate him properly. Look at Mike's attitude. It's problematic. How could he have grown up without learning to choose his words carefully? I was secretly moved by Mike's bravery and courage. His strength had been evident since he was a child, and I was proud that it hadn't changed. Mike, thank you, I said, feeling a surge of emotion. But I'm okay. Please wait a little further away, all right? I got it, Grandma. My mom is kind, Mike said, and I was deeply grateful for his defense. Kathy's words no longer held any weight for me, but I didn't want Mike to face any further hostility. At that moment, Tom, summoned by Mike, appeared with a concerned expression. What's going on? Why is everyone so tense? Kathy, slightly startled by Tom's arrival, replied weakly, Oh, it's nothing. I was just talking with Meg. Anyway, I'll make some dessert. She hurriedly retreated to the kitchen. After Kathy left the room, Tom turned to me, asking, Are you okay? Mike spoke up suddenly. Mom is being bullied by Grandma. I rushed to explain, trying to avoid going into too much detail, but realizing Tom would worry if I didn't come clean. I shared how Kathy's harsh remarks had tormented me since we got married and revealed that I had secretly recorded some of her verbal attacks over the years. Tom was visibly shocked upon hearing the samples of the verbal abuse I had endured. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked, his voice filled with regret. I'm sorry I didn't realize this was happening. I'm truly sorry for not standing by your side. It's okay, I reassured him. After Mike was born, I was so occupied with daily child rearing and housework that I hardly thought about Kathy. You've done really well in such circumstances. Thank you, I added. I've been enjoying watching Mike grow up and haven't been concerned about the bullying much since becoming a mother. I never realized how strong you've become, Tom said, looking at me with admiration. No matter what happens, you can still smile. Oh, stop saying things like that, I replied, laughing lightly. We reminisce about the past with fondness. Having Tom and Mike by my side made the sting of Kathy's words seem less significant. However, a significant event was about to further test my relationship with Kathy. When Jason decided to retire, Tom and I planned a special surprise to celebrate. We wanted to give him something memorable and thought, how about a trip abroad? After discussing it, we decided on a family trip to Kunun. Jason's eyes lit up at the suggestion and he proposed, since we have the opportunity, let's all go together. So it was settled. Our family of 3, along with my in-laws, would travel to Kunun. It would be the first time for both families to travel abroad. Tom was a bit concerned and asked, considering my mother is coming too, are you sure it will be okay? I reassured him, saying, if we manage our time well and do activities separately when needed, it will be fine. We'll have a fun trip. In reality, I hope to spend minimal time alone with Kathy and, above all, to ride the positive vibe of the trip to create good memories. I was taken aback by Kathy's enthusiasm while planning the trip. She was incredibly excited, pulling out brochures and constantly suggesting places to visit. I questioned whether it was appropriate for her to make so many decisions about a trip that was meant to celebrate Jason. Jason, the true guest of honor, was genuinely kind and smiled at his wife's enthusiasm, doing his best to accommodate her wishes. Seeing his supportive attitude, I decided to respect his feelings as well. On the day of the trip, we woke up early, filled with anticipation, and headed to my in-laws' house. "Good morning, Dad and Mom. Please get in the car," I said cheerfully. Jason responded with a big smile. "Thank you for today. I've been really looking forward to this." "Grandpa, let's sing a song together on the way," Mike invited enthusiastically, and Jason eagerly agreed. I quickly took a seat on the opposite side of Mike, and the three of us settled into the back seat. Kathy gracefully occupied the front passenger seat, while Tom took the wheel, ready to drive safely. The seating arrangement seemed ideal for a comfortable ride to the airport. The journey was smooth with no traffic congestion. We chatted, sang, and soon arrived at the airport with some time to spare. We decided to explore the airport, which had many shops and an observation deck. Mike, who loves watching airplanes, enjoyed the view from the deck. Feeling hungry, Mike said, "I'm hungry," so we went to a small cafe for a light meal. Later, we browsed through a souvenir shop, and my in-laws appeared to enjoy examining various items. As our flight time approached, we began making our way to the gate. On the way, Kathy suggested, "Meg, do you want to take a break? I'll watch the luggage. Why don't you go to the restroom?" It seemed like a good idea, so I asked Kathy to keep an eye on our bags and took Mike, who said, "Mom, I want to go too, to the restroom." To our surprise, the restroom was crowded, with even the men's room having a line. The unexpected situation made me laugh. Kathy, upon hearing about the crowd, quickly offered, "I'll watch the bags, so you guys can go too." Tom and Jason decided to head to the restroom as well. It seemed Kathy had already used the restroom and was willing to wait for us. After using the restroom, Mike and I returned to where we had left Kathy, but despite searching, we couldn't find her or anyone else. I felt a wave of panic as I tried calling Tom, but my calls went unanswered. I was bewildered. Had they already gone to the boarding gate? The absence of our luggage only added to my confusion. Was it stolen? I didn't know what to do and felt a surge of anxiety. Just then, I received a call from Kathy. "Hello," I answered. Kathy's voice came through with an unsettling cheerfulness. "Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Kathy laughed and said, "There's no need to tell you, Meg. I just want to enjoy myself with my husband and son. You two are just in the way." I was stunned. Wait a minute, this has to be a joke, right? My voice shook with confusion and growing anger. "Your luggage?" Kathy said casually. "Oh, I think I threw it somewhere." Her tone was flippant. Panicking, I glanced around and spotted our luggage hidden under a chair nearby. Is this some kind of joke? What are you trying to achieve with this? My anxiety shifted to frustration. "Oh, calm down," Kathy said dismissively. "I've made sure your wallets and passports are safe. How about spending the night on the streets for fun?" She laughed heartily. "Where's my husband?" I demanded. "Tom would never allow this." "Mike couldn't wait to get on the plane, so he went to the boarding gate with you first," Kathy replied, as if it were a game. "That's why I had to make you rush and sit apart. I thought he'll notice right away." Her voice conveyed an unsettling sense of enjoyment. Fury and shock overwhelmed me. I couldn't believe Kathy would go so far, especially involving her grandson. "We're going home now," I said, my voice heavy with defeat. "Sounds good," Kathy said cheerfully. "I'll pick out some souvenirs for you, of course, on your credit card." With that, she hung up, clearly believing she had the upper hand. I never thought it would come to this, but I knew she'd get her comeuppance soon. After hanging up, my phone vibrated with a WhatsApp message from Tom. "Are you okay? I can't see our seats from here." I quickly explained the situation. Kathy had tricked us, and now we couldn't board the plane. Tom responded immediately. "Seriously? What happened?" I provided more details, and he seemed genuinely flustered. "I can't believe this, but okay, I'll come down right away," Tom said, his voice a mix of disbelief and determination. I quickly formulated a plan to handle the situation and tried to calm him down. "Let her think she succeeded for now, but I need a favor," I explained. Tom agreed and decided to head to Canaan with Kathy for the time being. In the meantime, I went to the police to report my wallet as stolen and called the credit card company to temporarily suspend it. We needed to protect ourselves from any potential harm. Once that was settled, Mike and I decided to head home and make the best of the situation. We planned to enjoy our next trip even more, although I never imagined our trip to Canaan would turn out like this. Despite the unexpected turn of events, there was a silver lining. The time spent with Mike turned out to be special. We adjusted our plans and decided to stay at a resort hotel. The view from our room and the delicious food became the highlights of our unexpected vacation. Mike, clearly delighted, even offered me a bite of his food with a bright smile. "Mom, this is delicious," he exclaimed, his grin reassuring me that we had made the right decision. We also enjoyed a lovely barbecue at my parents' place. The aroma of grilled meat and the warmth of family made it feel like a true vacation. 3 days later, my husband and father-in-law returned, looking genuinely remorseful for Kathy's actions. "I can't believe what my wife did. It's inexcusable," Jason confessed. "Meg, I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful." Though they tried to apologize, Mike and I had moved past our initial anger. I was curious about their trip, so I asked. Tom laughed and shared that it had been a huge success. It turned out they had executed the revenge plan I had conceived. After directing Kathy to a luxury hotel, they went elsewhere, leaving her to fend for herself. Kathy arrived at the hotel, only to discover that I had canceled our reservation. Tom and Jason ignored all of Kathy's attempts to reach them and thoroughly enjoyed their time in Canaan. When Mike asked excitedly if it had been fun with Grandpa, Tom smiled and replied, "Yes, but next time, let's all go together." He then filled me in on Kathy's series of misadventures. Mom kept sending frantic messages, Tom said with a sigh. "Apparently, she had to stay at a cheap inn and barely got any sleep. She was counting on your credit card and the money from me and my father. But it turns out she hardly had any cash on her. She hasn't had a proper meal since the one we shared on the first day. She's been both physically and mentally worn out." Hearing about Kathy's predicament gave me a sense of relief. When Kathy finally arrived, she looked utterly drained and confused. "What have you done to me?" she exclaimed, her disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes clearly showing her distress. No one in the house sympathized with her. "You brought this upon yourself," we told her. "I heard from Meg about how you've mistreated her for 12 years. Kathy tried to defend herself, but Tom cut in. "Meg recorded everything. I was shocked when I heard the recordings. I had no idea you had said such things to Meg. You always acted kind to us on the surface, but behind our backs, you were doing this. And then the incident in Canaan, leaving Meg and Mike like that and even stealing the wallet. What were you thinking? This is clearly a crime." Kathy protested. "Wait a minute. I just wanted to have a good time with the family. Meg and Mike are family too." Tom's voice grew cold. "I'm done with you as a family member. I'm considering a divorce. I never imagined you'd do something like this. You've been deceiving us for so long. I can't forgive you for hurting our precious family. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore." Kathy, ruthlessly berated by her husband and son, looked down, her face pale and shocked. She kept apologizing afterward, but the situation remained unchanged. "Meg, I'm truly sorry. I'll apologize as many times as needed. Please forgive me," Kathy said with a hint of desperation in her voice. I responded firmly, "Well, that's going to be a tall order for a lifetime because of your harassment as a mother-in-law. I went through a very tough period. I will be claiming compensation for that. Also, about taking my precious wallet without permission, I'll be reporting that to the police, and you should definitely pay the hotel cancellation fees." At my decisive words, Kathy's face turned even paler. Due to this incident, she suddenly found herself burdened with massive debt. Having been a housewife for many years, the only jobs she could find were minimum wage. Her relationship with her husband fell apart, and she started a new life alone in a modest apartment, working to pay off her debts. On the other hand, our family regained our peaceful days. The following year, we all planned and managed to go on an overseas trip together. Mike, experiencing foreign culture and scenery for the first time, was thrilled and enjoying himself. Seeing him happy warmed my heart and made me realize how important it is to cherish and love my precious family deeply. I'm Emily, a 25-year-old who had been living a quiet, unremarkable life with my boyfriend Mike. Our relationship, which had started back in college, felt more like a familiar routine than a passionate romance. We often argued, mainly about Mike's lack of interest in planning for the future or his late-night gaming marathons, which left me to sleep alone. We were constantly skirting around the big question of our future without ever really addressing it. It wasn't that we didn't care for each other. It's just that somewhere along the way, we stopped making an effort. My parents, Sue and George, were the polar opposite of us. Married for over 30 years, they still shared loving glances and private jokes, their bond seemingly unbreakable. They were the ideal I aspired to find for myself, even if it wasn't going to be with Mike. On the evening of the crash, I remember arguing with Mike about something as trivial as unsorted laundry. He had promised to handle it, but as usual, the promise was as empty as the laundry basket was full. "Can't you just do one thing you say you're going to do?" I asked, my frustration evident. "It's just laundry. It'll get done eventually," he replied, his attention fixed on his computer screen. The argument fizzled out, as they often did, leaving the deeper issues unresolved. Later, as I sat in the back seat of my parents' car, their warmth and laughter provided a soothing balm to the residual frustration from the argument. They were celebrating another year of Mom's life, and their joy was infectious. Then, in an instant, everything changed. Headlights collided with the sound of metal on metal, and everything went black. When I woke up, the antiseptic smell of the hospital and the relentless beeping of the heart monitor were the first things I noticed. The doctor's words were clinical and detached, but the message was clear. My parents didn't survive, and my legs, once taken for granted, might never carry me again. The truth settled like a stone in my stomach. I was terrifyingly alone. Mike, who had just argued with me about laundry, was now my only connection to a life before the crash. The life where my biggest worry was whether he'd sort the whites from the colors. As the reality of my parents' absence and my potential paralysis began to sink in, a hollow despair took root. The future, once a landscape of possibilities, now felt like a barren field. The hospital room was a bubble where time moved too quickly and not at all. After what felt like an eternity of white walls and echoing silence, Mike walked in, his parents Janet and Bob a step behind him. The atmosphere was heavy with a somberness that made my heart sink even further. Mike pulled up a chair next to my bed and took my hand, his usual bravado absent. His parents stood by the door, a united front of awkward concern. "Hey, Mike began, his voice a rough whisper. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us." He paused, looking at me with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Everything that's happened, has made me realize how short life can be. I don't want to wait for the perfect moment anymore because it might never come. I want to say something, but the words seem stuck in my throat. What I'm trying to say is, will you marry me, Emily? The question hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. It was the last thing I thought I'd hear, especially now. I searched his face for the impulsive Mike I knew, but all I saw was earnestness. Janet stepped forward, her hands clasped. "We want you to be a part of our family, Emily. We'll take care of you, and it's not out of pity," Bob added quickly. "It's because we love you and want to support Mike in taking this step." I was stunned, my mind racing. This was a lifeline, unexpected and maybe even a little reckless, but a lifeline nonetheless. I looked at Mike, really looked at him, and saw not just my sometimes immature boyfriend, but a man offering support in the most uncertain time of my life. "Mike, my voice trailed off as I tried to gather my thoughts. "It's okay, Em. You don't have to decide right now. I just wanted you to know how I feel," he said, his thumb rubbing circles on the back of my hand. I thought about my parents and the unwavering love and support they had always shown me. Wasn't this what they would have wanted, for me to be loved and cared for no matter what? "Yes," I found myself saying, the words stronger than I felt. "Yes, I'll marry you." A genuine smile spread across Mike's face, the first I'd seen in days. Janet let out a soft sob, covering her mouth, and even Bob's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Moving into my parents' house with Mike should have been a fresh start, a new chapter. The house felt too big for just one person, and everywhere I looked, I saw memories of my parents. I thought Mike would fill some of those empty spaces, but I was learning quickly that his presence was more of a reminder of what was missing than a replacement. In the beginning, he was attentive, always checking on me and making sure I had everything I needed within reach. But as days turned into weeks, the attentive husband act began to wear thin. Mike started spending more time on his computer, his headphones on, shutting me out. One evening, as I maneuvered my wheelchair to the kitchen, I found him staring blankly at his screen. "Mike, have you thought about looking for a new job?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "The insurance won't cover everything, and the bills are piling up." He didn't look away from the screen. "I told you, I'm taking care of you now. That's my job," Mike said, his tone resolute. "I can manage during the day." I pushed back, feeling a twinge of frustration. "You don't need to be here all the time." Finally, he turned to face me, his expression a mix of irritation and something else I couldn't quite decipher. "What do you want from me, Em? I'm here, aren't I?" I was taken aback by his tone. "Being physically here isn't the same as being present, Mike. I need a partner, not just a roommate." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. "You know what, Em? Maybe I need more than this too. Maybe I wasn't cut out to be a nurse." His words stung, and I watched him storm out, slamming the door behind him. I was left alone in the silence of the kitchen, the weight of his words settling around me like dust. I wasn't just alone, I was lonely. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought about how quickly our modest honeymoon period had ended. The vows we had taken felt like they were from another lifetime. The Mike who had promised to stand by my side through sickness and health seemed like a stranger now. As the weeks dragged on, his absences grew longer and his excuses more flimsy. He was either out with friends or lost in a digital world that seemed to have no room for me. I felt like an obstacle in his life, a burden he hadn't anticipated. One particularly tough day, when the pain was bad and the house felt more like a mausoleum than a home, I heard the front door open. Expecting Mike, I called out, "Is that you?" "Yeah, it's me," he replied, his voice distant. "I'm just grabbing a few things, then I'm heading out again." I wheeled myself to the hallway and watched as he rifled through a drawer for his keys. "Going out with friends?" I asked, trying to mask the hurt in my voice. He paused, keys in hand, and sighed. I need some space, okay? It's not easy for me either." I nodded, biting back tears. "I know. I just thought we could spend some time together, like we used to." He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Maybe when things settle down a bit, I've got to go." The house felt emptier with each passing day, a vast space filled with silence and the ghosts of better times. It wasn't just Mike's absence or the void left by my parents' voices. It was the small things that started to go missing. A vase my mother loved, a silver frame holding a family photo, a painting that used to hang in the hallway. I first noticed it when I was trying to distract myself with memories. I wheeled myself into the living room, intending to look through the photo albums, but as my eyes scanned the room, they fell on the bare patch of wall where the painting had been. "Mike?" I called out, unsure when he had last gone out. There was no answer, and the emptiness of the house seemed to echo back at me. That evening, when Mike returned, I asked him, "Have you seen the landscape painting that used to be in the hallway?" He barely glanced up from his phone. "Oh, that old thing. It was getting dusty, and I figured we could use the space for something else." Something about his casual dismissal didn't sit right with me, but it was my mom's favorite, I said, a tremor of unease in my voice. He shrugged, his attention still half on his screen. "We can get another painting. It's no big deal." But it was a big deal. The items that went missing next were unmistakable, things that had been in my family for years. One afternoon, I caught Janet, Mike's mom, in the act. She was bustling around the living room with a big black garbage bag. "Janet, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp with alarm. She jumped, a guilty flush creeping up her neck. "Oh, just some spring cleaning, dear. This place is cluttered with so many old things." "But those are my things," I protested, my heart rate picking up. "Oh, we're just making things nicer for you," she said sweetly. "You'll thank us later." I watched her like a hawk every time she visited after that, but the thefts became sneakier, more calculated. And every time, the sense of violation deepened. When I brought up the missing items, I was met with reassurances that it was all in my best interest. One night, lying in bed while Mike scrolled through his phone, his new nighttime ritual, I said, "Mike, your parents have been taking things from the house." "My things?" He didn't look up. "Mom's just trying to help. You know she's got a knack for this sort of thing." "Help?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "By taking my parents' belongings." He sighed, finally setting his phone down and turning to face me. "Look, they think we should be looking forward, not backward. They're just trying to lighten your load." I wanted to scream, to rage against the violation and disrespect, but I was exhausted, tired of fighting, tired of questioning my own sanity. "This isn't what I want," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. Mike reached over and patted my hand, a gesture that felt more patronizing than comforting. "Try to get some sleep, Em. Things will look better in the morning." I couldn't take it anymore. I confided in Anna, my closest friend and a massage therapist who had been helping with my rehabilitation. Her visits were one of the rare sources of relief I had. "Anna," I said as she worked on my stiff muscles, "things are going missing around the house. And I can't shake the feeling that Mike and his parents are behind it." Anna paused, her hands stilling on my shoulders. "Have you talked to Mike about this?" "I have," I said, "but he just brushes it off, saying his parents are helping us by decluttering." Anna's brows furrowed with concern. "That doesn't sound right, Em. Do you want me to do something? Maybe come by more often and keep an eye out." The idea sparked something in me. "Could you help me set up a camera or something to record what's going on when I'm not in the room?" Anna nodded with determination. "I'll bring something over tomorrow. We'll get to the bottom of this." True to her word, Anna returned the next day with discreet recording devices, which she placed in strategic locations around the house. It felt like something out of a movie. And if I weren't so desperate for the truth, I might have laughed at the absurdity of it all. A few days later, Anna came back with the recordings. We sat down to listen, and as Mike's and his parents' voices filled the room, the blood in my veins turned to ice. Their scheme unfolded through their casual conversation. "Once we get her committed, the house and everything in it will be ours," Mike's voice said, clear and cold. "Yeah, the place will sell for a fortune. And all those antiques, pure profit," his mother added, her tone greedy. "We just need to make sure Emily doesn't catch on before we have everything in place," his father chimed in. Tears streamed down my face as I listened to their betrayal. The people who had promised to care for me, to be my family, were plotting against me. Anna's hand gripped mine tightly, her voice laced with anger. "We have to do something, Em." I wiped my eyes, the sorrow quickly giving way to a steely resolve. "We will. I'm not going to let them get away with this." The morning after listening to the recordings, I tried to act normal, but every word they said and every smile they gave felt like a lie. It was during breakfast when the full weight of their deceit settled in. I noticed something was wrong when the usual city noise that drifted through the open window was absent. I wheeled myself over to investigate, only to find that the ramps that allowed me access to the garden were gone. "Mike," I called out, panic lacing my voice. "Where are the ramps?" He came into the room, feeding ignorance. "The ramps? Oh, they were looking a bit worn. I thought they needed fixing." I stared at him, trying to process the betrayal. "And you didn't think to tell me? How am I supposed to get around?" His gaze was evasive as he shrugged. "I just thought you'd be safer inside for now, until we get new ones." The room felt like it was spinning, and it wasn't due to my injury. Safer or trapped? The words slipped out before I could stop them. He didn't respond, just turned and walked away, leaving me seething with anger and helplessness. Later, when I asked Janet about it, she was syrupy sweet with false concern. "We're just looking out for you, dear. We wouldn't want you to have an accident," she said, touching my shoulder with a faint, insincere tenderness. I pulled away from her touch, feeling the sting of their deceit. "I didn't realize needing ramps qualified as a hazard," I replied, my voice steady but my insides trembling. Janet's eyes hardened for a moment before she regained her composure. "We're just trying to help, Emily. It's for the best." That night, as I lay in bed, the darkness felt oppressive. Mike was out again, probably drowning his guilt in cheap beer and fleeting thrills. I reached for my phone, its screen a small beacon in the dark, and dialed the emergency number Anna had given me. "Anna," I whispered when she picked up. "They've removed the ramps. I'm literally trapped in my own home." Her voice was a lifeline amid the turmoil. "Hang tight, Em. I'm going to make some calls. We'll sort this out." The next day, I was in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell. My heart pounded as I maneuvered toward the entrance. It was Anna, flanked by a man and a woman in crisp suits with stern expressions. They were from a local disability rights organization here to assess my living situation. Beside them stood my lawyer, Mr. Hammond, clutching a leather briefcase. "Emily, we're here to make things right," Anna said, her determination matching the resolve in my chest. Mr. Hammond stepped forward. "We need to establish the facts first. Emily, I'll need to see the house and check against the inventory of your parents' belongings." As we moved through the house, the representatives from the service took notes, their disapproval clear at the missing ramps and the blatant disregard for my welfare. Mike walked in during the commotion, surprise etched on his face. What's going on? Who are these people? I looked at him, really looked at him, letting the full weight of my gaze settle on him. I'm taking back control, Mike. This is my lawyer, and these are advocates for people with disabilities. They're here to ensure my home is safe and that my rights are respected. Janet and Bob entered the fray, their confusion turning to fear as they realized the seriousness of the situation. Emily, darling, what is this about? Janet's voice trembled. It's about my rights, my home, and the truth, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Mr. Hammond is here to confirm the inventory of my inheritance. Mr. Hammond opened his briefcase, pulling out documents and photographs. We have detailed records of all items bequeathed to Mrs. Harper. It seems several are missing. Bob's face paled. Emily, I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I replied, the recordings Anna had provided playing in my head. And I have more than just missing items to discuss. Mike's parents exchanged glances, their facade of caring in-laws crumbling before my eyes. Mike stood there, silent, the reality of the situation dawning on him. Anna moved closer to me. We also have evidence of the conversations you've had regarding Emily's property and well-being. The advocates from the Disability Service spoke up. Removing access to the ramps is a direct violation of Mrs. Harper's rights. We'll be taking action. As Mr. Hammond laid out the evidence of their theft and their plans for my future, I saw the trap I had been in from the outside, but now the tables had turned. I was no longer the victim in their game. I was the one calling the shots. Mike finally found his voice. I can explain. I shook my head. Save it, Mike. I've heard enough. Janet started to cry, and Bob put an arm around her, but there was no comfort to be found in their deceit. The day of the trial was a culmination of everything I had endured. The courtroom was stark, the air thick with tension. Mike and his parents were on one side, looking nothing like the family that had once promised to care for me. I was on the other, with Anna beside me and Mr. Hammond ready with his briefcase of evidence. As the proceedings began, the judge looked down at us from his bench, his gaze lingering on me for a moment. We are here to examine the evidence regarding the allegations of theft and the premeditated exploitation of Emily Harper, he said. Mr. Hammond presented the recordings, the inventory discrepancies, and testimonies from the disability advocates. The evidence was damning, and Mike's family could do little but squirm under the weight of their deceit. Janet sobbed quietly, her sobs a soundtrack to the unraveling of their scheme. We never meant for things to go this far, she whispered when it was her turn to speak. The judge's voice was firm as he addressed them. You took advantage of a vulnerable person. There's no excuse for your actions. Mike stood, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry, Em. I never wanted to hurt you. I looked at him, the history we shared flashing before my eyes. Sorry, is it enough, Mike? You chose this path. The gavel came down like the final word on the life I had once known. Mike and his parents were found guilty, reparations were ordered, and they were to have no further contact with me. With Anna's support and a dedicated team, I began physical therapy. Each small movement was a victory, each step a testament to my resilience. My legs, once lifeless, began to tingle with new strength. One day, as I managed to stand with the help of parallel bars, Anna cheered me on. Look at you, Em. You're doing it. The smile on my face was mirrored in her own. I am, aren't I? The joy bubbled up from a place I thought had been broken beyond repair. I moved forward, one day at a time. The house, once a mausoleum of my past life, was slowly transformed back into a home, a sanctuary where I healed and grew stronger. My name's Nora Thompson. Tonight, like most nights since arriving in Monte Carlo, I found myself sitting alone at a small cafe on the edge of Casino Square. It's a far cry from the luxurious life I was born into. After graduating from an elite college in the States, all I wanted was a simple break from the world I knew. My father owns a vast empire from hotels to tech firms, but I use my mother's maiden name to keep things grounded and to avoid the spotlight. The evening had cooled when he walked in. Daniel exuded an air of ownership, or at least the confidence that comes from wearing a suit worth more than most people's rent. He pulled out the chair opposite me without asking. Mind if I sit? He finally said, though he was already seated. His smile was all charm, probably well rehearsed. "Looks like you're already sitting," I replied, barely glancing up from my coffee. He chuckled, his laugh too smooth. "I'm Daniel, and you are?" "Nora," I said curtly, giving him a quick once-over. Not my usual type, too polished, but admittedly good-looking. "So, Nora, what brings a girl like you to a pricey haunt like this all by yourself?" His tone was teasing, and I wasn't sure if I was amused or annoyed. "Just enjoying my coffee," I answered vaguely. "And you?" I asked. "What's your excuse?" "I could say business, but I'd be lying," he said with a smirk. "Tonight, let's just say I'm scouting for something interesting, and it looks like I might have found it." I raised an eyebrow. "Hope the coffee lives up to your expectations then." Daniel laughed. "Something tells me it's already exceeded them. I wasn't here to make friends or find a fling. Look, I'm not one of those girls who falls for lines if that's what you're aiming for. And I'm certainly not interested in whatever game you're playing." "Who says I'm playing a game?" he asked, his voice lowering slightly. "Experience," I replied. "You sit down uninvited, start with a line. What, do you expect a phone number or a date?" He leaned back, genuinely amused now. "You're tough. I like that. Not looking for a number, just conversation. But if it's too much, just say the word, and I'll vanish." I considered him for a moment. Monte Carlo was beautiful but lonely. Maybe a little chat wouldn't hurt. "Conversation is fine, but keep it light." We talked for a while. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. He didn't press for personal details, and I didn't offer any. As the night wore on, I realized I was actually enjoying myself. Daniel wasn't like the usual guys who try to impress me with their wealth or connections. He had an air of someone used to the finer things but not defined by them. Eventually, the evening drew to a close. "Well, Daniel, this was unexpectedly pleasant," I said as I stood to leave. "Surprised yourself, huh?" he asked with a grin. "Maybe just a bit. Good night, Daniel." As I walked back to my apartment, his words lingered in my mind. Monte Carlo had indeed turned out to be full of surprises, and perhaps, just perhaps, I had stumbled upon one tonight. After that first encounter with Daniel, the nights in Monte Carlo seemed a bit less solitary. He had a knack for appearing wherever I was, whether I was exploring the local markets or having a late dinner by myself. His persistence wasn't annoying. Surprisingly, it was quite the opposite. Maybe because he wasn't push-shy, he just seemed genuinely interested in being around me. One breezy evening, as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, he walked over with 2 coffees in hand and sat down beside me without a word. Assuming I wanted coffee, I teased, raising an eyebrow. He handed me a cup. "If I'm wrong, I'll drink both." "Good guess," I said, accepting the coffee. We sat in silence for a bit, the sound of the waves filling the quiet moments. "You never told me what you do back in the States." Daniel finally broke the silence. "Didn't think it mattered." I shrugged. "I work. Right now, I'm just enjoying not working." "Fair enough," he chuckled. "Everyone's got a story, though, don't you think?" Over the next few days, we fell into an easy routine. Daniel showed me parts of Monte Carlo I hadn't explored yet. We talked about everything and nothing: movies, books, our favorite foods. He loved to argue about the best James Bond actor, staunchly defending Daniel Craig, while I was all about the classics like Sean Connery. One day, as we strolled along the beach, he stopped suddenly and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "Nora, I know I'm just some guy you met at a cafe, but these past weeks have been, I don't know, different. Better because of you." I stopped too, unsure how to respond. Feelings were not what I planned on dealing with here. "Daniel, I like hanging out with you. I do. But this is just a break for me. I'm not looking for complications." He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "I get it. No pressure. Just know that I'm here, okay? And I think you're pretty amazing." Days turned into weeks, and my time in Monte Carlo was drawing to a close. Daniel and I spent more and more time together. What started as casual walks and talks turned into late-night dinners and early morning breakfasts. It was the last thing I expected, to fall for someone under the Mediterranean stars. Then one evening, he dropped a bombshell. "Come back with me, Nora. Work at my company in the States. I know it's sudden, but I think it could be great." The idea was crazy, completely insane. And yet, part of me was tempted by the adventure, by the idea of taking this, whatever it was, and seeing where it could go. Moving back to the States felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Daniel's offer wasn't just a job. It was an invitation into his life. Suddenly, I was living in an ordinary apartment in an ordinary part of town, playing the role of an ordinary girl who'd lucked out. My father, however, had different ideas about ordinary. He showed up unannounced one afternoon just as I was unpacking my last box. His booming laugh filled my small living room as he stood in the doorway, towering and larger than life. "Nora, hiding out in plain sight, huh?" He chuckled, giving me a hug that almost crushed my ribs. "So, tell me about this decision. This guy must be something special for you to up and move like this." His tone was light, but I could tell he was probing, doing his fatherly duty to sniff out any trouble. I sighed and sat down on the couch. "His name's Daniel. He's different, Dad. He doesn't know about all this," I said, waving vaguely around to imply the wealth and the complicated strings attached. Dad sat down next to me, his expression serious now. "Nora, you know you can't keep that a secret forever. If he's going to be part of your life, he should know who you are." "I know, Dad. I want to be sure about him before I complicate things. Thanks for looking out for me, though." He ruffled my hair, like he used to when I was a kid. "Always, kiddo. Just remember, if you need anything, I'm just a call away. And I've got eyes everywhere," he added with a wink. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjusting to my new job and new life. Daniel was a constant presence, supportive and charming as ever. But there was an edge to him now, a sharpness that came with the responsibilities he carried. One night, over a quiet dinner at my place, Daniel brought up a topic I'd been dreading. "Nora, when do you think I'll get to meet your parents? I feel like I'm missing a big part of your life." I paused, the weight of the moment settling over me. "Well, my mom passed away a long time ago, and my dad's just a regular trucker. We're not exactly on speaking terms right now." Daniel frowned, a hint of concern crossing his face. "I'm sorry to hear that, but whenever you're ready, I'd like to meet him. Family is important." I nodded, appreciating his sentiment, but knowing full well the reality of my father's world, a world I wasn't ready to introduce Daniel to just yet. Life with Daniel moved at a pace I never expected. We were already blending our lives together. My job at his company was going great, and our relationship was deepening. It all seemed like we were gearing up for something big, but I was still taken aback when that big moment actually happened. It was a normal evening. We were at his place, a cozy upscale apartment with views of the city skyline. We had just finished dinner, nothing fancy, just takeout because neither of us felt like cooking. We were sitting on the couch, a documentary about ocean life playing in the background, the kind you watch but don't really watch. Daniel turned to me, his expression more serious than the situation called for. He took my hand and suddenly, I felt my heart race as Daniel took a deep breath. "Nora," he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything we've been through, and everything I want for our future." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Yeah? I love you, Nora. I love everything about you, and I can't imagine my life without you." He paused, swallowing hard, his nervousness palpable. "That made two of us. I want to be with you always. Will you marry me?" Just like that. No kneeling, no ring box, just straightforward and genuine, just like Daniel. I barely hesitated before replying, "Yes." The word rushed out almost as a relief. "Yes, I will." His face lit up with that wide, infectious grin that had won me over from the start. He pulled me into a tight hug, and we spent the rest of the evening excitedly discussing our future, what we wanted and where we saw ourselves. It was thrilling and a bit daunting, but it felt right. The next challenge was telling my dad. I anticipated him being pleased, but his response was lukewarm at best. "Nora, you know I want nothing but your happiness," he said, his voice heavy with concern. It was thrilling and a bit daunting, but it felt right. The next challenge was telling my dad. I anticipated him being pleased, but his response was lukewarm at best. "Nora, you know I want nothing but your happiness," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "But are you sure about this? It's all happening so fast." "I'm sure, Dad. He's a great guy. You'll see." I tried to sound more confident than I felt. He sighed. "All right, but promise me you'll sign a prenuptial agreement, just to be safe." The word prenuptial didn't scare me. It was just another part of the modern marriage package, especially with someone who had as much to lose as I did, even if Daniel didn't know the full extent of it. "Of course, Dad. We'll handle it," I assured him. "Good then, and Nora, I won't be at the wedding. I don't want to spoil your story about being a simple girl." Next came the introduction to Daniel's mother. Her reception was icy from the start. During dinner at their family home, she scrutinized me with a look that could freeze the room. "Daniel, are you sure about this girl? She doesn't seem like a fit for our family," she remarked bluntly. Daniel tried to smooth things over, but his mother was relentless. "A prenuptial agreement is non-negotiable," she insisted. I agreed without hesitation, knowing it would ease some of the tension. Absolutely, I wouldn't have it any other way. Later, we formalized the terms with a lawyer present. Despite these hurdles, our wedding in the Maldives was breathtaking. Standing beside Daniel with the ocean whispering behind us and the sand beneath our feet, I felt a surge of hope. It was just us, our love, and a future we were ready to shape together. Despite the rocky start with family expectations, married life began better than I could have hoped. Daniel and I settled into our new house, a beautiful place with more space than we'd ever need. It was supposed to be the start of our perfect life together. I threw myself back into work, determined to prove that I was more than just the boss's wife. My role at the company had always been challenging, but now there was an added layer of expectations. I was not only managing projects but also involved in key decision-making processes. Initially, Daniel seemed proud. He'd introduced me in meetings with a hint of pride in his voice. "This is Nora, my wife and our project lead." But as the months passed and the projects I led brought in significant profits, boosting the company's profile, something in Daniel began to shift. It was subtle at first, a comment here, a slight remark there. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, he brought it up. "Nora, you're doing great at work. Maybe too great," he said, his voice strained. I looked up from my plate, puzzled. "What do you mean, too great? Isn't that good for the company?" "It is," he admitted, pushing his food around on his plate. "But the guys are starting to say it's turning into the Nora show over there." His words stung. "Isn't that a bit unfair? I thought you'd be happy that we're doing well." "I am happy," he said, though his tone was uncertain. "But it's a lot. You know, everyone's always talking about you, about how you handle things. It makes me wonder." The conversation marked the beginning of a series of challenges between Daniel and me. As the business grew, so did the strain in our relationship. Daniel's once supportive demeanor was now changed with resentment. I couldn't comprehend why he was upset. Wasn't he the one who had encouraged me to take on more responsibility in the first place? Things took a turn for the worse when his mother came to stay with us for a few weeks. Her presence brought with it an old-world attitude that I had always managed to avoid. She made offhand remarks about my work, questioning how a wife could be so absent from home. "You're always at the office, Nora. When do you have time to take care of your husband?" she would say. I tried to shrug off her comments, aiming to keep the peace, but her words only deepened the growing rift between Daniel and me. It seemed that no amount of professional success could mend what was slowly unraveling at home. The more I achieved at work, the more our marriage suffered. One evening, Daniel came home with a grim expression. "Nora, I think it's best if you leave the company. We need to focus on our family, and your role there is causing too much tension." "Leave the company? But why? I've been contributing so much," I said, my voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "It's for the best. You can focus on the house, maybe start that garden you've always talked about," he replied dismissively, as if he were deciding on something trivial rather than my career. The next day, I discovered that he had let go of all our household staff. Housekeepers, cooks, gardeners. It was all on me now. "You wanted to be more involved at home. Here's your chance," he said coldly. I wasn't afraid of housework, but the way this was thrust upon me felt wrong. This wasn't the loving, caring man I had married. This was someone else, someone intolerant and controlling. His mother, who was still staying with us, seemed to relish the situation. "It's good for a wife to focus on her home," she would say, smirking slightly whenever Daniel talked about my new role as a full-time housewife. As I adjusted to this unexpected turn in my life, I felt a deep sense of shame. A shame that I hadn't seen this coming. A shame to admit that maybe my father was right about Daniel. When Daniel suggested a trip to Monte Carlo to rekindle what was left of our spark, I was hesitant but hopeful. That hope quickly faded when his mother announced she would join us. "It's been ages since I've traveled," she declared loudly, as if it were a decree that couldn't be opposed. Daniel welcomed her with open arms, never considering my feelings. We rented a small house in Monte Carlo, charming but costly, and it quickly became my prison rather than a retreat. From the start, Daniel and his mother treated the city as their playground. They rented luxurious cars, visited exclusive boutiques, and dined at the finest restaurants while I was left to manage the household. They demanded home-cooked meals, reducing me to little more than a servant in our holiday home, cooking and cleaning while they enjoyed the city. As days passed, Daniel's mother's comments grew sharper, her tone more venomous. "Really, Nora? Living at someone else's expense must be quite the life," she would sneer, her words a slap disguised in a smirk. Daniel never defended me. Instead, he laughed, his laughter a betrayal that echoed around the cold walls of our temporary home. I felt isolated, the city's sparkle muted by the shadow of their disdain. One evening, we passed a grand old-style hotel, its facade a reminder of a world of elegance and respect. Daniel's mother, her voice dripping with envy, remarked, "Lucky billionaire Harris. Imagine owning such a hotel, ruling over a palace like that." That night, at a restaurant overlooking the sea, the last vestige of my patience crumbled. As we sat down, she waved the waiter over with an imperious flick of her wrist. "For Nora, the cheapest dish will do. No need to spoil her with extravagances she doesn't deserve," she declared loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear. Daniel's response was a casual chuckle, his agreement signaled not just by his words but also by a dismissive wave of his hand. "Good call, Mom. Let's not go overboard." Humiliation washed over me like the waves crashing on the rocks below. I rose from my chair, the clatter of the sea echoing my turmoil. Facing them both, my voice steadied but louder than I intended. I said, "I will not tolerate this any longer." My hands trembled, but my resolve was firm. "I'm divorcing you, Daniel." The cold air of Monte Carlo felt warm compared to the chill of betrayal as I walked away from the restaurant. Instead of apologizing, Daniel and his mother followed me with insults. As I quickened my pace, my mother-in-law's voice rang out sharply, "Just look at her, a beggar, unworthy of my son." My heart raced, but before I could get far, Daniel caught up with me and yanked my purse from my shoulder, his fingers clenching it tightly. "This is my money, Nora. Go on, get out on all fours if you have to," he said with contempt, yanking the purse away and leaving me stunned on the sidewalk. Beside him, his mother laughed cruelly, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Maybe now you'll learn to beg in Monte Carlo, since that's all you're good for." Their laughter echoed down the street, leaving me feeling powerless and alone. But as they hurled their final insults, fate intervened. We were near the grand old-style hotel Daniel's mother had earlier envied. Pointing to the hotel, she sneered, "Maybe they'll let you in as a beggar." At that moment, the hotel's gates opened and a guard appeared, his face lighting up with recognition. "Miss Harris," he called out warmly, walking over with a respectful salute. The shift in the atmosphere was palpable. Daniel and his mother's expressions changed from satisfaction to confusion. The guard smiled broadly. "Your father told us you might come by. Please, this way. The best room is always reserved for you." Daniel's mother paled, her earlier bravado crumbling. "Harris, as in the billionaire Harris," she stammered, her voice faltering. Ignoring them both, I walked towards the guard, my posture straightening. "Thank you, Pierre," I said, my voice calm and collected. Inside, I felt a mix of relief and vindication. Behind me, Daniel's pleas began in a desperate tone. "Nora, please, I didn't mean it." His mother, not to be outdone, shouted past her son, "Perhaps we could come in for a drink at least." I didn't look back. Entering the hotel, the doors closing behind me felt symbolic, shutting out the chaos of my old life. Pierre escorted me to the reception, where the staff greeted me with the respect due to the daughter of their employer. The flight back to the United States was long, giving me ample time to contemplate my next steps. By the time I landed, my resolve had solidified like the city sidewalks, unyielding and steadfast. The following day, I found myself in the office of a reputable lawyer, papers spread out like a battle map. "During your tenure at the company, it appears your husband failed to pay you bonuses owed for the multi-million-dollar deals you closed," the lawyer pointed out, his tone a mix of surprise and indignation. "That sounds about right," I sighed, reflecting on the countless hours I devoted to the company and the success I had driven. "We're suing for $3 million. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the heated glares Daniel shot across the room as he fumbled through his defense. The man I once loved looked pitiful. When the verdict came, awarding me $3 million, Daniel's face crumpled. Outside the courthouse, he made one last plea. Nora, everyone's laughing at me. I messed up. Can we start over? His words might have tugged at my heartstrings once, but that time had passed. You only miss the money, Daniel. Maybe listen less to your mother next time, I said, my voice sharp against the crisp air. I turned and walked away, the sound of my heels on the pavement marking the end of that chapter. Returning home, I faced my father. The air between us was thick with unspoken words until I broke the silence. Dad, I should have listened to you. He wrapped me in a warm, forgiving hug. You had to learn on your own. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. We talked late into the night about life, mistakes, and new beginnings. His advice was a beacon as I navigated my thoughts about the future. Inspired by our conversation, I began laying the groundwork for my next venture. My experience at Daniel's company had not only honed my skills but ignited a passion for the industry I couldn't deny. I decided to open my own investment firm. With my expertise and the substantial settlement, I had the resources to start something meaningful, something mine. Weeks turned into months as I built my business from the ground up. The challenges were daunting, but every setback taught me a lesson, and every success confirmed that I was on the right path. Sitting in my new office, overlooking the bustling streets below, I realized how far I had come, from a disillusioned wife in a loveless marriage to a competent business owner. The journey had been fraught with hurdles, but each one had made me stronger. Hi, I'm Jessica, a 30-year-old woman, and I want to share a recent experience that helped bring closure to a difficult period in my life, one that involved both my husband and his family. This chapter began a few months ago, and now that the dust has started to settle, I'm still processing the emotional fallout. I believe opening up about it might help me heal. Let's rewind to 3 years ago when I made a significant life decision. I married my boyfriend, Tyler. We met through mutual friends and enjoyed 3 wonderful years together before deciding to tie the knot. Tyler was always the life of the party, fun, attentive, and loving. He came from a well-off family and had a great job, which meant he could shower me with gifts and affection. Our bond grew stronger over our shared love for travel, and as our relationship deepened, my friends frequently praised him, genuinely happy for us. Tyler's generosity was often overwhelming. I remember when he bought me a new laptop for my college graduation, a gesture that, while incredibly kind, also made me feel uncomfortable at times. I couldn't help but notice the financial imbalance. Tyler, I'm just a student, I'd say. I can't match your spending. Let me at least split some costs. But Tyler would brush it off, insisting that it was normal for him to pamper his partner, just like his friends did. Eventually, I accepted his gestures, though I still sought ways to contribute within my means. Once I landed a good-paying job after graduation, I was excited to reciprocate his generosity. We started sharing expenses more equally and even talked about moving in together. You can move in with me, Tyler said one day. I inherited my house from my grandpa, so no rent to worry about, but we can split everything else to keep things fair. Although I had some reservations, Tyler reassured me that he had my best interests at heart, and so we embarked on this new chapter together. Things were going smoothly. Our financial responsibilities were shared fairly, given our different incomes, until I had the chance to meet Tyler's family. They lived far from us, and Tyler had work commitments, so I had to host them on my own. Before their arrival, Tyler warned me about their judgmental tendencies but didn't go into much detail. He just advised me to smile through it and not take any harsh words to heart. With that in mind, I approached the meeting with cautious optimism. However, any hope of a warm welcome quickly vanished when Tyler's parents and sister arrived. Instead of the friendly atmosphere I'd anticipated, they showed up visibly annoyed, setting a tense tone from the start. It didn't take long before their opinions about me became painfully clear. "So, you're the woman Tyler's been seeing," his mother Martha said coldly. "I didn't expect to find you living here. Do you even pay rent?" "No, Martha," I replied calmly, though her question caught me off guard. "Tyler told me the house was fully paid for, but we split all other bills evenly." Martha wasn't convinced. "Just because the house is paid for doesn't mean you can freeload. This is Tyler's house, not yours. Remember that." Her words stung, and the conversation grew more uncomfortable. Tyler's sister, Teresa, wasn't any better. She barely spoke to me, opting instead to glare or mention her marriage to a billionaire, as if to remind me of her superior status. Every attempt I made to connect with her was met with dismissiveness. Throughout their visit, Tyler offered no support. In fact, he seemed to side with his family, echoing their sentiments. His parents criticized my spending habits, particularly my purchases of makeup and skincare products, claiming they were frivolous considering my so-called limited contributions to the household. Their skepticism about my financial independence only deepened, partly because of comments Tyler had made. He casually mentioned to them, "Jessica was just a struggling student when we met," as if I'd been entirely dependent on him. While it's true Tyler supported me financially early on, his portrayal wasn't entirely accurate, and it felt like he was subtly reinforcing their negative opinions. Tyler's family's disapproval of me, combined with his passive stance, made the entire experience incredibly challenging. It left me questioning not only my relationship with them, but also the dynamic between Tyler and me. I was caught off guard by these remarks and reminded Tyler that we had already adjusted our financial arrangement to split the bills equally. I explained that I had lived modestly both before and during our relationship and that any luxury items I had were gifts from him, gifts I had often warned him against due to their extravagance. Yet Tyler defended his lavish spending, claiming that his social status required him to give extravagant gifts. It became clear that his generosity was more about impressing his friends than truly caring for me. Their visit left me with a bitter feeling, so I confronted Tyler about the entire ordeal once they left. Unfortunately, he brushed it off. "Don't take it to heart, Jessica," he said dismissively. "They meant well. What they said wasn't serious. Relax, you're overreacting." Despite my concerns, he refused to acknowledge the problem. 5 months later, Tyler proposed, and despite my reservations, I accepted in a moment of happiness. We started planning our engagement party, deciding to split the costs evenly. By then, I was running a small business on the side. Tyler knew about it, but he never really showed interest in how much I was earning. To me, it was more of a fulfilling hobby than a major source of income. When it came time to organize the engagement party, I decided to indulge a bit, feeling it was an occasion worth celebrating. Tyler supported me in this, and we made sure to share the expenses equally. I even took on the additional costs of covering plane tickets for my extended family so they could attend. However, as the celebration unfolded, the same old criticisms resurfaced. "You shouldn't have splurged so much on this party, Jessica. You're draining Tyler's account before you're even married. At this rate, you'll end up with a backyard wedding," his family sneered. "I thought you were financially irresponsible, but it's worse than I imagined." Their harsh words stung once again, clouding what should have been a joyful moment with doubt and frustration. I stood my ground and firmly responded to Martha. Yes, the party was extravagant, but we both agreed to it. I paid my share, and it was actually your son's idea to invite so many people. Tyler had insisted, and I couldn't say no, especially when he mentioned he didn't mind the expense. But the criticism continued. Martha accused me of manipulating Tyler into spending more than he should, while Teresa chimed in, claiming she knew exactly what kind of person I was and that I should have been more considerate. Frustrated and overwhelmed by the tension, I excused myself to find some peace outside on the venue's lawn. There, I overheard Teresa and her husband Justin laughing at my expense. It felt like my engagement party was falling apart, with Tyler seemingly oblivious to his family's harsh judgments. Many of his extended relatives assumed I was jobless, painting me as a dependent fiancé. Noticing my distress, my mom, always protective and perceptive, approached me. As someone who had raised me as a single parent, she understood the challenges of managing finances and urged me to reconsider the engagement, pointing out the ongoing mean comments from Tyler's family. After the party, I confronted Tyler about everything that had happened. He shrugged it off, saying they were just joking, and reassured me that financial matters didn't concern him because he loved me. But I was firm, telling him I wanted to contribute more significantly to our expenses, including rent. Once again, he dismissed the idea. As we moved forward with wedding planning, the stress only intensified. Tyler's parents continued to criticize every choice I made, accusing me of bankrupting their son. The constant scrutiny made the engagement period feel unbearable. I tried explaining that everyone, including my mom, was pitching in for the wedding expenses, but Martha sharply accused me of taking advantage of Tyler, suggesting that I was trying to drain his bank account. Amid these accusations, my in-laws unfairly branded me a gold digger. I calmly addressed Gabriel, hoping to alleviate his concerns. "Gabriel, I'm not asking for any financial help. We are completely capable of financing the wedding ourselves," I reassured him. But despite my explanations, Teresa didn't hold back her criticisms, especially about the cost of my dress and makeup for the wedding day, even though I had clarified that those were covered by my mother. The ceremony itself went smoothly, but during the reception, Martha and Gabriel continued to criticize my spending habits, accusing me of financially exploiting their son. Despite the harsh words, I knew that no matter how much I explained or defended myself, they were determined to paint me in the worst possible light. I chose to remain silent, determined not to let any conflict ruin what was supposed to be a special day. A few months later, Tyler received a significant promotion at work, and he was eager to celebrate with a grand family dinner. I was thrilled for him and wanted to make the occasion even more memorable, so I offered to cover all the expenses myself. "Tyler, I want this dinner to be something extraordinary. I'm so proud of you, and I want to celebrate your success," I told him enthusiastically. He appreciated the gesture, and I shared that my business was flourishing, providing me with a stable income, and that I had recently accessed a trust fund from my paternal grandfather. I meticulously planned the entire event, determined to make it perfect for his celebration. However, when his family arrived, they were visibly displeased, despite the positive feedback from other guests. It became clear that they had reservations about the lavishness of the dinner. During the speeches, Martha stood up, her voice loud enough to command the room. "I want to thank everyone for gathering here to celebrate my son," she began. "He's incredibly hardworking, generous, and truly deserving of this promotion. Unfortunately, his good fortune hasn't extended to his choice of a partner." The room grew tense as her words hung in the air. "It's unfortunate that, of all people, he's tied himself to what some might call a gold digger." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but I remained still as she continued, her tone dripping with regret. "I only wish he'd had seen her true nature earlier. Then maybe he wouldn't have to work so hard to support her lavish lifestyle." Her eyes scanned the room, making sure her message was heard. "It's painfully obvious to everyone here that his wife has been extravagant, from the engagement party to tonight's dinner. It seems she has nearly drained his accounts." The sting of her words was sharp, but I kept my composure, knowing full well that any reaction would only fuel their baseless accusations. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Martha added smugly, "Thank goodness we had Jessica sign a prenuptial agreement before the wedding. At least some of his assets are protected." She sighed, almost relieved, as she continued, "It's a good thing my son married someone who can at least keep up the appearance of a trophy wife." Tyler chimed in, agreeing with his mother. "I can't even afford to spend money on myself anymore. There's nothing left," he lamented, going so far as to say that marrying me was a mistake. He even compared my behavior unfavorably to what he imagined another wife might do in a similar situation. In shock and frustration, I finally spoke up. "Do you really think I'm a gold digger?" Tyler's response was sharp and hurtful. "Your lifestyle is quite damaging to my bank account." Stung but determined to set the record straight, I confronted the accusations head-on. "Since you all think I'm such a gold digger, let me show you my bank balance. Maybe that'll clear things up." I revealed my financial independence to the room, which was met with disbelief. Amid the heated exchange, Martha pointedly accused, "Did you steal my son's money?" Tyler added suspiciously, "She must have taken it from you." Frustrated but calm, I responded, "I don't need to steal money from your son. Everything I have is from my own hard work. Besides, I recently accessed a trust fund left by my grandfather. I had plans to use it to buy a bigger house as a surprise for Tyler, but given the circumstances, that seems unlikely now." Despite my efforts to clarify, Tyler, seemingly ignoring the tension, suggested, "We can still buy the house. It'll be a wonderful gift." But I was resolute. "This is not happening. Your family has insulted me for too long, and you've never once stood up for me. Instead, you've allowed these false assumptions about me using your money to continue." My frustration was evident as I made my stance clear. Tyler, attempting to downplay the situation, claimed, "You're overreacting." But I knew I couldn't let it go this time. I was told I was overreacting, but I stood firm. "No, I'm not overreacting. Everyone here knows what your family has been saying about me. They were here when you allowed them to insult me at our engagement party." Feeling the weight of years of disrespect and humiliation, I reached a breaking point. I could no longer tolerate the toxic environment and told Tyler bluntly, "I want a divorce." As Tyler tried to plead and explain, my mother intervened. "You've never defended my daughter. It's time she ends this toxic relationship for good," she declared firmly. We left the party, leaving behind a crowd of shocked attendees who whispered among themselves. Despite the dramatic scene, I was resolute in my decision to end the relationship. My mother's support was unwavering, marking the end of a painful chapter in my life. After the confrontation, I went straight to our home, gathered my belongings, and while Tyler persistently tried to reach me, I muted my phone and went to stay with my mother for solace. The next day, I contacted my cousin, a lawyer, to start drafting the divorce papers. With a prenuptial agreement in place, the process promised to be straightforward, sparing me from sharing any of my significant financial assets with Tyler. However, the situation escalated when Tyler and his family showed up at my mother's doorstep, demanding to speak with me. My mother stood firm and instructed them to leave. Meanwhile, Tyler's messages ranged from tearful apologies to unsettling threats, which I documented and prepared to use for a restraining order if necessary. My mother's steadfast support gave me strength. Tyler even attempted to confront me at my office, but after informing security, he was promptly escorted out. It was then I decided to resign from my well-paying job. My thriving business meant I no longer needed the position, and I was no longer focused on accumulating wealth but on seeking a peaceful and dignified life. I handed in my resignation that very day and began moving forward. A week later, I served the divorce papers to Tyler at his workplace, only to find out he had already been informed of my resignation. My former colleagues reported his continued attempts to send flowers and gifts to my mother's house, which we consistently returned. The ongoing harassment led me to consider relocating. With my mother's encouragement, I found an ideal house in a neighboring state, providing a sanctuary away from my ex. As I awaited the finalization of the divorce paperwork, the judge facilitated a smooth proceeding thanks to the strong prenuptial agreement. During the 5 months of our separation, I took the time to regroup and prepare for a new chapter in my life. I quickly settled into my new home, changed my number to avoid the incessant messages from Tyler and his family, and began to enjoy my newfound freedom. I heard through the grapevine that Tyler's life was falling apart. He blamed his parents for the end of our marriage and faced professional setbacks as his colleagues distanced themselves and his superiors were displeased with the negative publicity. His parents contributed to the turmoil by spreading infidelity rumors, but thankfully, these baseless accusations didn't gain traction. In contrast, my life began to flourish. I focused on growing my business and embraced my newfound freedom. I started going out more and even re-entered the dating scene. While Tyler's past actions made me cautious, I remained hopeful that I would heal and eventually find someone who truly values and cherishes me. Although Tyler's actions caused me considerable pain, the strength I gained from overcoming those challenges propelled me into a brighter future, full of possibilities and self-discovery. I look forward to what lies ahead, confident in my resilience and clearer about what I seek in relationships and in life.